18 years. I waited 18 years for this exact birthday, and I can tell you the precise reason why, because it's embarrassing, and I've made peace with that. When I was younger, I made a deal with my father. No women until I turned 18. A prince's honor pact, sealed with a handshake and everything. So there I am on the morning of my 18th birthday, sprawled on a sandalwood rocking chair in the backyard of Prince Xiong's mansion, watching the dancers my mother hired, doing the math in my head. Deadlines today. Contract expired. I stood up with the confidence of a man about to legally change his life, and a servant boy in a blue robe came sprinting across the courtyard screaming that something terrible had happened. The music stopped. The dancers froze. My entire romantic future evaporated in real time. I sat back down. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. Quick context because my life requires a disclaimer. My name is Wang Kai, and I died on Earth. Robbed in an alley, stabbed in the kidney, bled out on the pavement, the universe said, "Lol, no second chances, buddy," and then immediately gave me a second chance, because I woke up in a womb, reincarnated. New World. The Tianxuan continent. A place where martial artists can move mountains, pluck stars out of the sky, and decide your life or death with one word. As a transmigrator, I obviously had one job: become one of those people. Instead, my body turned out to be defective. My meridians were sealed shut. I trained for 2 years, hit a wall at body refining, the level where you're basically a guy who does push-ups, and gave up. Every farmer's kid with a wooden sword could gather chi. The heir of Prince Xiong's mansion could not. So I pivoted. Hard. If I couldn't be a cultivation genius, I'd be the most committed rich waster this dynasty had ever seen. Cats, dogs, music, wine, professional lounging. My father was a prince of the great Jin dynasty, a Dharma form realm powerhouse, one of the 5 kings of the land. Nobody was going to touch me. It was, honestly, a pretty good life plan for a man with no life plan. Back to the servant boy. He skidded to a stop, panting. "Your Highness, Princess Mei Shou has come with people. To annul the engagement, the prince wants you in the front hall." Annul the engagement. Now, I had read enough novels in my past life to know exactly what scene this was. Trash young master, publicly dumped by his talented fiancée on a milestone birthday. This is chapter 1 material. This is the part right before the protagonist rises. My heart actually skipped a beat, not from heartbreak, from recognition. I walked to that front hall like a man walking into his own origin story. The hall was full of guests, which is the point of these things. Public humiliation doesn't work without an audience. My mother, Princess Dongfang Yue, the most beautiful woman in the capital, and I will fight anyone on this, waved me over to sit beside her, calm as a lake. My father, Prince Wang Junyi, stood there looking bored, and across from us, Hao Mei Xiu, daughter of the Prince of Pingxi, my fiancé for approximately 8 more minutes, standing next to a gray-robed old man who radiated the specific smugness of a man from a big sect visiting the countryside. Mei Xiu bowed, very graceful. She'd been chosen by an elder of the 7 Stars sect, she said. She was leaving for the sect. She didn't want to delay my life. Therefore, and here it came, she humbly requested to annul the engagement. Translation? She'd hit the innate realm before 16. I couldn't gather chi. And dragging me behind her would be like entering a horse race with a couch. Knowing the plot is one thing. Standing in a hall full of guests while it happens to your face is another. By tomorrow, I'd be the punchline of the whole capital. I kept my voice cold. "Princess, when you came here today, did you spare one thought for the reputation of this house?" She apologized. Then she took out a jade bottle, 3 top-grade gin gathering pills, and offered it as compensation. To help me break through someday. That's not a gift. That's a participation trophy with extra steps. My mother's eyes went cold and swiveled to my father, radiating a very married message. This engagement was your idea. My father coughed and told Mei Xiu that an arranged marriage gets unarranged by the parents who arranged it, so she could go home and send her father. And then the gray-robed elder decided he'd been patient long enough. Enough of this nonsense. He flicked his sleeve. The engagement is off whether you like it or not. How could a piece of trash who can't even reach Jin gathering be worthy of a disciple of my 7 Stars sect? Slap. My father hit him from across the hall without moving from his spot. "You old fool. You've been arrogant in my house all morning and now you insult my son." The hall went dead silent. That was a Dharma form elder of the region's overlord sect, and my dad had just backhanded him remotely like he was swatting a fly off the furniture. The old man's eyes bulged. You, slap, again. What do you mean you? It's an honor that a king is hitting you personally. The elder's face twisted. His aura erupted. The real thing. Sect elder killing intent. The kind that makes guests dive under tables. He got exactly none of it out. The third slap was the serious one. The old man's head spun all the way around like a doorknob, and he dropped, dead, instantly. In front of 40 guests, an elder of the 7 Stars sect had been slapped to death for calling me trash. I'd love to tell you I reacted with princely dignity. Internally, I was a stadium doing the wave. That's how a man handles it. My father looked at Meisho, who had gone paper white, and said, "Take this old bastard's corpse and get out." She grabbed the body and fled like her life depended on it, because it did. The guests remembered urgent appointments. Within minutes, the busiest party of the year was an empty building. At which point, my survival instincts finally came back online. Dad, that was a 7 Stars sect elder. Even the royal family doesn't offend them. We're going to have to run. My father waved his hand like I'd complained about ants at a picnic. What's there to fear? It's a tiny little sect. The overlords of the entire province. A tiny little sect. And then his face did something I'd never seen it do in 18 years. It got serious. Son, there's something I've kept from you. It's time you knew the truth. My brain, helpfully, you're adopted. It's always adopted. Your mother and I are not from this continent. Okay, adopted from very far away. We come from a higher world, a great thousand world called the primordial ancient realm. I am the young lord of the Wong clan. Your mother is the daughter of the chief of the Dongfang Emperor clan. Both are supreme god races, among the most powerful families in that whole realm. He pressed a finger to my forehead and a flood of information poured in. Maps, histories, clan hierarchies that made the great Jin royal family look like a lemonade stand. The Wong clan, a legacy of trillions of years, one of the 13 ruling powers of an ancient realm full of actual immortals. And the reason we were here, in this backwater, a family tradition. Every promising child of the main bloodline gets dropped into a lower world for a trial. Grow up, get strong on your own, earn your way home. There was more. I hadn't failed cultivation because I was trash. I'd failed because I was born with the Wong clan's ancient emperor bloodline. A bloodline so pure my grandfather had spent his own life essence refining treasures to strengthen it further. And baby me couldn't contain the power, so they'd sealed it. 9 layers of seals. My meridians weren't broken, they were a vault. I sat there processing this like a beggar who's been eating out of dumpsters for years and just found out he's the emperor's son. Except more. Dad, you're not making this up, are you? He rolled his eyes and unlocked the first seal. I do not recommend the experience. The seal cracked open and something molten came out of my bones. And my clothes burned off, literally burned off. And every cell in my body got individually boiled and scrubbed like a dirty pot. 2 hours of it. My mother sat beside me the whole time with her heart in her throat because she knew this had to happen and hated every second anyway. When the pain finally ebbed, she fed me an elixir, and cool relief washed through me, and I heard my father say, delicately, "Ahem, put some clothes on first." I looked down, sprinted into the house to a soundtrack of my parents laughing at me. 18 years old, heir of a supreme god clan, naked in his own courtyard. Then came the good part. Father transmitted our clan's ancestral technique, the heaven-refining ancient scripture, main bloodline exclusive, and told me to cultivate. The spiritual chi of the world, which had ignored me my entire life like I was a closed shop, came rushing in from every direction. Jin gathering, blew through it. Innate, first layer, second, 9th. True essence realm, all 9 layers, like flipping pages. I didn't stop climbing until the 9th layer of the sea transformation realm, top tier for this whole dynasty. And the only reason I stopped was that my body politely asked for a break. 18 years a cripple, top of the food chain in one afternoon. My father nodded like this was a normal Tuesday. The first seal alone will carry you to the king realm within a month. Don't rush. And then his voice went heavy, and I knew what was coming, because the information dump had included the rules. The trial is solo. No family, no backup, no calling home. Now that you've begun cultivating, your mother and I must leave. He gave me 2 jade pendants. The golden one held 3 of his strikes, 3 get-out-of-death cards. The purple one was the clan's homing beacon. Crush it, and someone comes to walk you back to the Wong clan. I hope, he said, you never use either. Come home on your own strength. I won't let you down. My mother hugged me hard enough to compress my new cultivation base. Be careful out there, alone. Your father and I will be waiting for you in the primordial ancient realm. And then they dissolved into light, that they'd been incarnations all along, projections wearing my parents' faces for 18 years. And the courtyard was very big and very quiet, and I stood there staring at the sky for a long time. A mechanical voice went off in my skull like an alarm clock. Ding! Host has begun cultivation. Invincible sign-in system activating. 10%, 50%, 99%. Ding! Activation complete. I nearly fell over. A system, an actual system. As a transmigrator, I'd spent 18 years quietly resenting the universe for shipping me here without the standard equipment. And it turns out the package was just held up in customs until I could cultivate. So the novels were real, I whispered, with genuine religious feeling. Ding! The invincible sign-in system has bound successfully. Newbie gift pack available. Open? Don't ask rhetorical questions. Open it. 3 chimes. 1. An invincible cultivation technique called the Supreme Scripture, a triple-track monster that trains cultivation, body, and soul all at once, allegedly a straight road to invincibility. 2. A supreme treasure of the Great Tao called the Black Book. This book encompasses everything. The Great Tao knows all. 3. 10 billion top-grade spirit stones. Let me put item 3 in perspective. 1 top-grade spirit stone equals a million low-grade ones. My family's entire princely treasury held a few 100,000 low-grades. The whole Great Jin Royal Vault, converted honestly, was worth maybe a few dozen top-grade stones. The system had just handed me 10 billion. I probed the system space with my mind, saw an actual mountain range of glittering top-grade spirit stones, and lost my composure completely. Cackled, alone, in the courtyard. Calm down, I told myself. You're a professional. And then I cackled some more, because I was a professional who just won a 10 billion jackpot on his first scratch ticket. When I finally pulled myself together, I took out the Black Book. It looked like a dictionary with dark gold patterns, and then it grew a childlike face and spoke. Hello, master. I am the book spirit. It is my pleasure to serve you. I tested it. Did it know my origins? It strained, then admitted a mysterious force field blocked it, which told me the system was hiding me even from the Great Tao itself. Useful. Did it know the Wang clan? Master, the myriad realms contain 5,865,962,140 Wang clans. Please narrow it down. I narrowed it down. The book flipped itself open, pages rustling forever inside a cover a few 100 pages thick, and served up a family history more detailed than the one my own father had downloaded into my skull. Trillions of years of legacy, 13 ruling powers of the primordial ancient realm, and my family was one of them. Even the Black Book, a supreme treasure, couldn't read everything about them. You'll be called Hao Shu, I told the book. The book was delighted. I had just made my first friend of the new era, and he was a talking dictionary. Then the actual mechanics. The system's core function was the sign-in. 1 per day, once a day, no exceptions. Believe me, I asked, and the system's silence was withering. But here was the twist that separated it from every knockoff. Sign-ins accumulate. Save 30, and you can merge them into 1 monthly sign-in with better loot. 365 becomes an annual sign-in, guaranteed serious treasure. Keep hoarding, and there are Millennium and 10,000-year tiers whose rewards I couldn't even imagine. Daily sign-ins gave common stuff with a lottery chance of something real, and signing in at special locations boosted the odds. The system was basically telling me, travel, be patient, and get paid. I had exactly 1 sign-in available. Patience could start tomorrow. System, sign in. Ding. First sign-in successful. Congratulations, host. You have gained 10,000 years of cultivation. I blinked. 10,000 years. As in, the amount of progress an average cultivator across the myriad realms grinds out in 10 millennia, injected directly. Enough to carry me to the 9th heaven of the venerable realm, which, for reference, sits above saint, which sits above king, which sits above everything anyone in this dynasty has ever met. For one glorious second, I thought I'd won the game on day one. Then I read the fine print in my own knowledge. A venerable is a mid-tier nobody in the world my parents came from. The road was long. The road was very long. But the day had one more gift. My mother, on her way out, had slipped an antique ring into my sleeve. I probed it and got vertigo. The space inside was the size of a small world. Mountains of spirit stones, and above them spirit crystals, and above those, immortal stones. Spirit herbs, pills, immortal medicines, magic treasures stacked by the rank. I'd spent the afternoon feeling rich because of 10 billion top-grade stones. Compared to what my mom casually left in my sleeve, that was pocket change. Turns out the real tycoon in the family had been packing my lunch for 18 years. I lay on my bed that night doing inventory of my new existence. Dead once, trash for 18 years. Now, heir to a god clan, a sealed emperor's bloodline, a cheat system, a talking, omniscient book, and generational wealth from 2 directions. There was exactly one correct response to all of it, and I said it out loud to the ceiling. Get stronger. Then stronger. Then stronger than that. I moved everything valuable into the system space. No vault in any world is safer than the one inside your own soul. Sat cross-legged on the bed, opened the supreme scripture, and started pulling those 10,000 years out of storage. Meanwhile, the capital was having a collective aneurysm. The annulment was juicy gossip for about an hour, right up until word spread that the Prince of Xiang had slapped a 7-star sect elder to death, at which point the gossip turned into obituary drafting. Prince Xiang's mansion is finished. Nobody survives offending the 7-star sect. In one restaurant, a whole table debated whether I was secretly hiding my strength, and concluded that even if I was, we'd all be dead within the week anyway. Encouraging stuff. In the north of the city, my friend Wang Fugui, fat, rich, and currently grounded, knelt in his family courtyard, attempted a stealth escape, and took a flying shoe to the back of the head from inside the house. His father bellowed something about breaking his legs. Fugui knelt back down and muttered an apology to me on the wind. Loyalty comes in many forms. His came with a bruise. In the imperial palace, Emperor Jin rubbed his forehead over the mess. He had exactly one trump card left from the founding ancestor, one favor that could maybe calm the 7 Stars sect, and he sat there running the odds like a gambler. The Prince of Xiang had saved his life once. The Prince of Xiang was also, he strongly suspected, from some terrifying hidden clan. Betting the trump card could buy that clan's goodwill. Betting wrong wasted it and painted a target on the throne. He decided to do what emperors do best, wait and see. If we really were from a mighty family, we wouldn't need him. He could swoop in afterward and take credit, a politician to the bone. And in the Pingxi manner, my ex-fiancée got new marching orders. Leave at dawn, deliver the elder's corpse to the 7 Stars sect, and enroll. Her father figured the sect wouldn't blame the messenger. Mei Xiu's eyes flickered with some plan of her own. File that away. Morning. I woke up. I'd cultivated straight through the night and pulled up my personal panel. Name, Wang Kai. Cultivation, Venerable, 9th Heaven. Physique, Divine Body of Time. Techniques, Supreme Scripture, Heaven Refining Ancient Scripture. Divine Abilities, none. Treasures, 1 sarcastic book. One night. Venerable 9th Heaven. And not a hollow rank either. The system's cultivation came pre-loaded with the insights, like I'd personally walked every step of 10,000 years at triple speed. I was now, in terms of raw realm, the single strongest being on this whole continent's public leaderboard, wearing the body of a teenager who last week couldn't beat up a goose. My bloodline had unsealed to the 3rd layer on its own from the pressure. I looked at my hands and had a thought I'd never had before in 2 lifetimes. I might actually be the danger now. Naturally, I signed in. System, sign in. Ding! You have obtained 100 million top-grade spirit stones. Again with the spirit stones? I stood there genuinely annoyed at 100 million top-grade spirit stones, which tells you how fast a man's standards can rot. I had mountains of the things. I had nowhere to spend them. You know that specific misery of the ultra-rich where money stops meaning anything. I achieved it in under 24 hours. Remember this bit. It becomes a theme. There was one piece of business to handle before anything else. The mansion staff. Everyone had heard about the sect elder by now. The whole compound smelled like quiet panic. I had Chen Wei, the servant boy in blue, my page since childhood, the one person in this place I trusted completely, gather everybody in the front yard. 100-odd people assembled, whispering. I kept it short. You know we've offended the Seven Stars sect. Calamity may be coming. Anyone who wants to leave, stand on my left. You'll get 2 extra months' wages and my blessing. Anyone willing to live and die with this house, stand on my right. No judgment either way. Chen Wei walked to my right before I'd finished the sentence, didn't even hesitate. Then the crowd shuffled, and the mansion emptied out in real time. When the dust settled, 13 people stood on the right. Chen Wei, Shen Long, commander of the guard, a true Essence Realm veteran, plus 6 of his men. Ye Ling and Su Hua, my mother's personal maids, Ye Ling with her little fists clenched like she was ready to die for the flag right now. 2 old grannies with nowhere else to go. And Uncle Gao, the old steward, innate 9th heaven at 60-something, who'd chosen to stay and then calmly paid out severance to everyone who hadn't. 13 out of 100. You know what? Honest number. I'd rather feed 13 real ones than 100 tourists. Everyone who stays gets their pay increased tenfold, I said, and then asked Shenlong what he currently earned. 300 low-grade spirit stones a month, he said. The others 50 to 100. I physically could not process those numbers anymore. I tossed him a storage ring with 1 million low-grade stones in it, restrained by my new standards, and told him to spend all of it making everyone stronger. He probed the ring and made a noise like a kettle. He thought I'd handed him the entire family treasury. Shenlong, buddy, that's the tip jar. Then I grabbed Chen Wei and went shopping, because my loyal 13 were also my catastrophically weak 13, and money was the one problem I could solve by throwing money at it. The Linglong Pavilion was the biggest treasure shop in the capital, a branch of a chamber of commerce so large it spanned the whole eastern region, 3,000 states, each one 100 times the size of our whole dynasty. A pretty attendant recognized me on sight, which wasn't flattering. After yesterday, everyone recognized me. I swept the building with my divine sense, cataloged every item on every shelf in about a second, and confirmed my fears. Their best merchandise, the stuff in the locked cases that Duke's mortgage estates for, junk. My standards had spent 1 day at venerable rank and already looked down on everything in the province. But my people could use it. Bring me all the spirit fruits in the shop, all of them. The attendant blinked once, professionally, and came back with 126 fruits. I added a pile of pills, a stack of cultivation manuals, a dozen swords and sabers. The manager himself materialized to handle the sale, a short, round old man at the Dharma form realm with a smile like a satisfied cat. 3.6 million low-grade stones. I paid it the way you'd pay for coffee, and his smile got a fraction more thoughtful. On the way out, he comped Chen Wei a book on formations the kid was eyeing, and I caught the glint in his eye as we left. Interesting, the glint said. Prince Xiang's mansion is not what it appears. Merchants gossip in ledgers. Next stop, the meat market, because cultivation resources come in 2 categories, pills and lunch. A shirtless butcher with a buzz cut, true Essence Realm, forearms like siege equipment, had a whole spirit deer hanging at his stall, 3rd-tier beast, fresh enough that it practically still had opinions. He quoted me 1,800 low-grade stones with the wince of a man expecting to haggle. I said yes so fast he visibly grieved, not asking for more. His name was Zhao Gang, and I told him to send every good catch straight to the mansion from now on. I take my supply chains seriously. We were nearly home when a voice like scented oil slid in behind us. Oh, isn't this Prince Wang? Your house offended the 7 Stars sect, and you're strolling the market instead of fleeing overnight. Zhou Ming, heir of the Marquis of Chang'an. 3 years ago, my father slapped 2 front teeth out of his father's mouth in a dispute, and the son had been taking it out on me ever since. And back when he was gin gathering and I was a push-up enthusiast, he'd collected on that grudge many times. He stood there with his golden spirit sword and his 2 flunkies and the grin of a man who thought today was another one of those days. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I just slapped him. He left the ground, both front teeth exiting the premises ahead of him, cheeks inflating in flight like sad little balloons. A father and son matching set, 3 years late. His flunkies caught him and stood there gawking, and by the time his head stopped ringing, we were gone. Chen Wei kept sneaking glances at me the whole walk home. Zhou Ming was a half step from innate, and His Highness had folded him with one casual hand. I could see the kid deciding, wisely, that some questions are above his pay grade. Back home, I dumped the entire haul on Chen Wei. Distribute it, take your own share, and don't save money for me, it's all for you. He probed the storage ring, froze solid, and whispered that with these resources you could cultivate a pig to the innate realm. That evening, he presided over the handout like a tiny, stern quartermaster, a superior Earth-rank cultivation technique, the kind of manual their old selves would have bled for a glimpse of, plus weapon arts, pills sorted by realm, and a spiritual artifact for every single person. He gave Shenlong a wind and thunder spear worth more than the man's lifetime salary, and informed them all that anyone who betrayed His Highness would die horribly. 13 people knelt in the courtyard swearing oaths. I'd asked for a staff meeting. He organized a cult of personality. Me, I went to the kitchen. The cook had quit in the Great Exodus, so I taught Ye Ling and Su Hua how to make hot pot, real hot pot, from my previous life, adapted with spirit herbs and third-tier venison. The smell that came off that broth should have been classified as a weapon. We set up 2 big tables in the back garden, copper pots bubbling, and I declared the master-servant hierarchy suspended for the evening. Nobody dared pick up their chopsticks anyway, until I sighed and let them retreat to their own table. Baby steps. What is that smell? 2 figures came through the garden gate like they owned it. Wang Fugui, the fat one, round face, honest eyes, the shrewdest liar in the capital, and a coward in all matters except loyalty, and Gu Lingyu, the tall one, folding fan, refined manners, secretly the kind of degenerate who memorizes brothel schedules. My 2 best friends and my 2 fellow rejects, both of them cultivation failures like me, both written off by their families, which is exactly why the 3 of us had found each other. The capital's Misfit Club, full membership, 3. Fugui had escaped house arrest through a combination of stealth and paternal business trips, and had the forehead bruise to prove it. He plopped down next to me and started complaining before his seat was warm. Ling Yu snapped his fan shut and proposed we drink until we dropped. It was, for 1 hour, the single most normal evening of my new life. Fugui tried to license my hot pot recipe on the spot, provide the recipe, I provide capital and staff. We split a restaurant empire. And I told him to just take it, he'd make it work. The Wang family could sell sand in a desert. Then he asked where my parents were, and I said they'd gone traveling, very far. And he gave me a look of profound pity and asked if I was adopted. I chose not to dignify that. He took my silence as confirmation and patted my shoulder with real tenderness. I have very good friends. They are also idiots. Seriously though, he said, mouthful, after this meal, you should run somewhere far away. When the 7 Stars sect comes for revenge, the sky answered him. A blue-feathered bird the size of a house crossed the horizon at speed, and pressure rolled off it in a wave that flattened conversation across the capital. It parked itself directly above my mansion. On its back stood an old man in purple robes, and behind him a man in his 30s whose eyes were doing the full bereaved Avenger glare. Citywide, 1 million people looked up and started composing our eulogy. In his manner, the Prince of Pingsea watched with unreadable eyes. In the palace, Emperor Jin's face darkened at strangers flying over his capital like it was open pasture. And then he swallowed it, because that's what you do when you're weak, and he knew it, and it burned. The old man's voice boomed across the city like weather. Where is the Prince of Xiong? Come out and face your death. Fugui's legs stopped working. Ling Yu went pale and called him a jinx, and I looked up at the giant blue bird and said the first thing that came into my heart. Nice bird. I've been needing a mount. Then I reached up and grabbed them out of the sky. One giant palm print of chi materialized from thin air, closed around 2 men and 1 enormous bird, and set the whole bundle down in my back garden like a takeout order. The pressure I let off pinned them to the lawn. The purple-robed elder, Elder Dung, Dharma form peak, sent to avenge his colleague, took 1 taste of my aura and understood, in a single career-redefining instant, that whatever was standing in front of him was deeper and darker than anything his sex founder could produce, and began begging for his life at a truly professional speed. The younger man stayed silent, grieving son of the slapped elder, here for blood. I asked. Elder Dung sold him out before I finished the question. A family should be together, I said. Go join your father. The son came apart like a mirror, no blood, no scream, just gone. My first kill, and I felt about as much as you feel deleting a file, which said something about what climbing this many realms this fast does to your wiring. I decided to examine that later. Much later. Elder Deng, meanwhile, was demonstrating the survival instincts that had kept him alive for a century. When I glanced at his bird, he tore up his own pet contract on the spot and gift-wrapped his loyal companion of decades before I'd even asked. If Lian Hua follows a peerless immortal like yourself, senior, it will be the greatest blessing of her life. His heart was audibly breaking. His mouth kept selling. I respected the hustle and let him live. The contract transfer nearly went sideways. A spirit-pet bond runs on exchanged blood, and I'd known academically that mine was rich. What I hadn't priced in was that even a casual drop of venerable blood carrying a thread of ancient emperor bloodline is, to a fifth-tier bird, less a contract and more a lightning strike delivered orally. The poor thing started inflating like a balloon at a birthday party, eyes wide with betrayal. And I had one genuinely alarmed heartbeat, my first pet, 30 seconds into ownership, about to detonate before I got a finger on her head and taught her body to sip instead of chug. And then, instead of exploding, she just upgraded. 5th tier, 6th, 7th, and climbing. The shockwave of each breakthrough rolling over the capital until every powerhouse in the city slammed their windows and a million citizens stood in the streets watching my garden glow. Deep in the palace, some ancient royal ancestor extended his divine sense toward the commotion to snoop, met my aura coming the other way, and coughed blood onto his own beard. He spent the rest of the night with his presence dialed to 0, pretending very hard to be furniture. The bird topped out at 7th tier peak, equal to the strongest human ancestors of the dynasty, 10 breaths after being a mid-shelf mount. And Elder Deng watched his loyal companion of decades soar past his own lifetime realm, wearing the complicated face of a man who is happy for his friend and also doing the math on what he'd just given away for free. The bird, Little Azure, we'll call her, because that's what she answered to, nuzzled my hand and spoke in the voice of a 7-year-old girl. "Master!" Elder Deng watched his ex-companion outgrow his entire realm in one evening, and I watched actual envy cross his face, followed by the visible urge to ask whether I was accepting more pets. He suppressed it. Barely. "Everyone eat," I told the garden. "I'll be right back." And I took Elder Deng by the collar and left for the 7 Stars sect. Because when a sect sends assassins to your barbecue, you don't send a letter back. 10 breaths, that's how long the trip took me, a journey that had cost Elder Deng most of a day at full flight. The sect sprawled across 7 peaks named after the Big Dipper, pavilions in the clouds, a city of 100,000 disciples nestled in the valley. Genuinely beautiful. I released one thread of aura over it, and the whole postcard went to combat stations. Their ancestor came out personally. Old Ancestor Zhuangji, King Realm 9th Heaven, an old monster wearing a young man's face, with a dozen elders arrayed behind him like nervous furniture. He took one read of me and bowed. "Junior Zhuangji greets the senior. May I ask what brings you to my humble sect?" Smart man. I let him be smart. He apologized for his disciples, produced an ancient jade box, and opened it. A small, crystalline, 7-petaled flower breathing life energy into the air. A crescent moon flower. A sacred herb that extends a king realm cultivator's life by 700 years. One of exactly 2 he'd found in 3,000 years of living. I took it out of his hands from across the sky and watched his pupils shrink as he processed that he hadn't seen me do it. "Very sensible," I said. "Then I won't make things difficult. But if there's a next time, the 7 Stars sect comes off the map. Watch yourselves." I didn't leave right away, though. I hung invisible in the clouds and watched, because words are cheap and I wanted to see the follow-through. Xuanji turned around and got to work like a man renovating a burning house, fired his own sect master on the spot for failing in his duties, promoted a replacement, ordered an internal purge of every bully and criminal in the ranks, and commanded my portrait hung in their ancestral hall, so that every future disciple would be taught, with incense and bowing, exactly whose son you do not insult. 3,000 years old, and not one wasted motion. That's how you survive 3,000 years, I suppose. He also ordered the dead elders' whole extended family investigated and dealt with, in case killing them might anger anyone else important. I want to be clear that I did not ask for that, and the casual way this world's old monsters weed whole gardens made something cold settle in my stomach. The strong here don't hate the weak. They just do arithmetic on them. I filed that away too, under things I refuse to become. Back home before the broth got cold, Fugui gaped at me. It hasn't even been tea break. And I sat down, picked up my chopsticks, and told them the Seven Stars sect wouldn't be a problem anymore. Lingyu studied me over his fan with those two clever eyes and asked, half joking, whether some ancient monster was wearing my body. So I laid my cards down, half of them anyway. I come from a mighty clan, I'd been undercover for 18 years, the assignment just ended. All true, all useless without context. Exactly how I like my honesty. If you're rich and powerful now, Fugui said solemnly, don't forget your brothers. So I didn't. I took out a milky white jade the size of a head, cracked it open. The fragrance alone made the two grannies at the far table feel 10 years younger, and poured 10,000-year spirit milk into my friends' wine cups. Then dumped a generous slug of it straight into their table's hot pot, because efficiency. What followed was the most satisfying dinner theater of my life. Fugui drank his cup, licked the rim, and broke through the barrier that had mocked him for a decade, then kept going. Jin gathering. Innate, all 9 layers at a dead sprint. He touched down at the 3rd layer of true essence and sat there, vibrating. A cup of milk had just carried the capital's designated fat failure past 99% of the dynasty's living cultivators. Lingyu watched with naked envy for exactly 2 seconds, downed his own cup, and, being the actual genius of our trio, ran his new technique so smoothly he landed at true essence 9th, 1 step from sea transformation, on day 1. At the staff table, Shenlong drank 2 big bowls of broth and broke into the sea transformation realm mid-sip. The entire guard detail leveled up over dinner. The 2 grannies got shinier hair. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Fugui leapt up, laughing that the #1 genius of Great Jin had reached true essence at 18 while he was 17, baby. And then a smell hit the garden. Impurities. The milk was scouring their bodies, and 2 decades of accumulated garbage was exiting through their pores. My 2 best friends looked down at the black sludge oozing out of their skin, looked at each other, and fled my party at their impressive new speeds, gagging, each trailing a personal stench cloud and a shouted promise to visit soon. I laughed until the bird got worried about me. Some breakthroughs humble the strong, ours just made them take baths. Chen Wei watched me walk inside afterward, and I heard him murmur the old proverb about shallow waters and dragons. He wasn't wrong. But the water had a couple more months of me yet, because I'd found a new obsession. In my mother's ring, among the casually apocalyptic inventory, sat over 100 emperor weapons, arms forged for great emperors, the peak of this whole cosmos, and 7 or 8 actual immortal artifacts above those. The immortal artifacts were out of my league. Trying to refine one now would be like a toddler licensing a warship, but an emperor weapon? That was a stretch goal. I picked a dark gold ancient sword called the Taya Emperor Sword, sat down behind a barrier, and started the refining process. It humbled me fast. The thing was sealed, and even sealed, its leftover sword chi could have shaved the mansion off the map. 1 day of work bought me a fingernail's grip on its core. 2 months, I estimated, for the whole sword, and this was me, with an emperor's bloodline and a cheat engine. I sat there recalibrating my entire threat model. If the unclaimed tool of a great emperor was this monstrous, what was the great emperor? Every plan I had that involved the word swagger got quietly rescheduled to after quasi-emperor. I closed the door and got to work. The city moved on without me, in the way cities do when they realize the doomed household isn't dying. Days passed and no sect vengeance arrived, and the capital did the math. Prince Shang's mansion had somehow settled things with the Seven Stars sect. Overnight, we went from plague house to hottest address in town. Great families showed up with gifts. The Prince of Pingxi himself came to apologize, twice, and got told both times that I was in seclusion, which had the advantage of being true and the pleasure of being rude. Meanwhile, Wang Fugui, 1 month into being a real cultivator, got bored, a condition that has ruined stronger men. He challenged Ma Tian, the official #1 genius of Great Jin, the golden boy who'd hit true essence at 18. Fugui was at the 7th layer by then, but fought like a man who'd learned combat from banquets. So he did the Fugui thing, played dumb, wobbled around, let Ma Tian relax, then unloaded everything in 1 shot and flattened him. Was it fair? Debatable. Was it a win? The whole city said so. The title of number one genius changed hands to a fat teenager whose main technique was lying. Ling Yu, watching, quietly learned an aura concealment art because the real winner of any leaderboard is the man who isn't on it. Then Fu Gui, ashamed, learned one too. My friends were growing, sideways but growing. 2 months in, the seal on the Taya Emperor sword shattered, and for one moment, the sky over the capital turned into an ocean of sword light. Billions of blades of chi, horizon to horizon, mercifully pointed at nothing. Refined. Mine. With that sword, I could fight things 2 realms above anything this continent had ever produced. So naturally, my first thought was, one sword is not enough. A man needs a defensive emperor weapon. No, 2. One for the body, one for the soul. Growing up poor in 2 consecutive lives leaves marks. But first, payday. I'd been in seclusion 66 days, which meant 66 sign-ins in the bank. I burned a few dailies, spirit stones, again. The system has one joke, a sacred healing herb called Phoenix Bloodgrass, 1,000 years of cultivation, and then tried my first monthly. Ding! You have obtained the Time Divine ability, a glance of 10,000 years. I read the description and got chills. An eye technique. Wherever I look, time flows. At full mastery, 10,000 years in 1 second. Aim it at a cultivator, and 1 second of eye contact bills them 10 millennia of lifespan, killing people by looking at them. My system had just handed me the evil eye of legend, and the manual downloaded straight into my brain. 1 hour of processing instead of a lifetime of enlightenment. Obviously, I had to test it, ethically. I flew out to a mountain, tied up a wild rabbit and a tiger demon, planted some spirit herbs, and looked at them. The first second. Leaves fell, grass died, the rabbit aged out of existence. 3 seconds. The tiger demon was a skeleton. 10. The skeleton was dust. 32 seconds, my current limit, and the whole hillside was a desert with 1 piece of rotten driftwood in the middle. I stood in my personal patch of fast-forwarded millennia and felt the specific joy of a man who will never lose a staring contest again. The second monthly sign-in coughed up a Bodhi seed, a legendary medicine that permanently sharpens comprehension and suppresses inner demons, which was perfect timing because I had an appointment with the hardest wall in cultivation. The jump from venerable to quasi-emperor, the leap from subject to sovereign, the one that requires you to condense the complete origin of a law. Cultivators camp on that threshold for tens of thousands of years. I had a shortcut. While training my new eye ability, I'd already touched the complete law of time. I ate the Bodhi seed, cracked open 100,000-year spirit milk, and settled in. 2 months later, the sky over the whole province turned black. Heaven does not let you become a quasi-emperor quietly. The tribulation clouds that gathered were so heavy that experts 3 states away flew up to gawk. And holy lands in distant regions sent projections to find out who was breaking through. The eastern region hadn't minted a quasi-emperor in tens of thousands of years. I looked up at the buffet of doom assembling over my roof, thought about the millions of people living under it, and did the polite thing, stepped sideways into the void between spaces and took the tribulation to go. The lightning followed me out. The province spent a week gossiping about the mystery senior. Nobody ever traced it to the teenager in the city below. And here's where I have to confess something about how I handled divine punishment. The Supreme Scripture's body-refining track, the imperishable golden body, strengthens through damage, so I didn't dodge the tribulation. I didn't parry it. I stood there and let purple emperor lightning hammer directly into my bare skin for a day and a night, using heaven's wrath as a free, full-body forging service. Every bolt hurt like being slowly sliced apart, and every bolt left me harder. Somewhere in the middle, with my clothes long vaporized and my hair burned off, bald as an egg, dignity fully cremated, a thought floated up. The system rewards signing in at special locations. Was the inside of a heavenly tribulation a special location? System. Sign in. Ding! You have obtained 1 Thunder Law origin. I started laughing, alone and naked and on fire in the void between worlds. A complete origin of the law of thunder, the thing quasi-emperors spend millennia condensing, gift-wrapped because I thought to punch a time card mid-smiting. I changed 5 more dailies on the spot, and the system, apparently feeling the theme, handed me a quasi-emperor trident of thunder, a quasi-emperor halberd technique, a top-grade sacred lotus, more spirit stones, the joke continues, and another 1,000 years of cultivation. When the last bolt faded, I stood at the early stage of the quasi-emperor realm, with Lu's an imperishable golden body at minor completion, flesh that shrugs off law attacks and arm wrestles emperor weapons. I checked my reflection, grew my hair back through sheer cultivation-powered follicle control, which is a real skill I now have, and went home. Little Azure got the phoenix blood grass for breakfast. She ate it, glowed, and broke through to the 8th tier, King Realm, the level of the strongest ancestors on this continent, and, as a bonus, woke up a thread of actual phoenix bloodline sleeping in her veins. My discount mount was apparently a mislabeled luxury model. She celebrated by learning to shrink down to sparrow size, then spent the morning perched on my shoulder, radiating smugness at the staff, all of whom had also leveled up so hard that Uncle Gao now had to look up at his own guard's cultivation. The old steward gave me the household report. Months of peace, one item of note. The palace had invited me to the Junlin banquet, the empire's once every 3 years youth tournament, 10 days out. I'd attended before as a spectator, back when entering would have been a form of public self-harm. I might go take a look, I said, and Uncle Gao smiled, the smile of a man who's watched a boy become a weather system. That week had one more order of business, my friends. They came over to freeload lamb, I'd roasted a whole spirit sheep, and those two could smell my kitchen from across the city, like hounds. And then, between mouthfuls, Fugui got uncharacteristically serious. He and Ling Yu had both quietly reached the sea transformation realm, hidden it from everyone, in Ling Yu's case under 2 full realms of camouflage, the sneaky fox. They'd talked it over. When I left Great Jin, and they knew I would, they wanted to come along. It's just carrying 2 people, I said, but I'm not leaving yet. Can you wait? They could wait. And then Fugui, unable to sustain seriousness for a full minute, mentioned the Hot Pot Empire. 30-plus restaurants, packed daily. The Wang family had monopolized the key spices, sold prepared soup-based packets, and turned my dinner recipe into a provincial industry. He'd been faithfully delivering my 50% to Uncle Gao every month, 800,000 taels of silver and 30,000 spirit stones so far. I tried to cut my share to 10%. He refused on merchant honor. We compromised at 30. And I want the record to show that the fat man argued me up. Brothers keep clean accounts, he said. The Wang family raised that boy right. Then they took me to a brothel, and it turned into a homicide investigation. In their defense, Tianshang Tower was technically a music venue, and the new headliner, Miss Jiang Ruo, sold her art, and only her art, a zither prodigy with a veiled face, a scholar's elegance, and a sadness under the melody that even I could hear, and I have the musical education of a rock. We booked a private room. Ling Yu went full poetry brain the moment she started playing. Fugui poured wine and ogled. It was shaping up to be a lovely cultural evening, right up until somebody kicked our door off its hinges. I froze every flying splinter mid-air and sent them back through the kicker's limbs on principle. Then his boss walked in, Xiao Feng, young lord of the Xiao family of Qingling County, a 1,000-year clan with 2 Dharma-form elders, the kind of family even the royal house tiptoes around. He didn't recognize us, called Fugui a fat country bumpkin, and then saw Ruo and dropped the mask entirely, threw gold at her feet like she was a vending machine and told her he'd take care of her. The girl went bloodless. And then she told the room, voice shaking with a hate that had clearly been carried for miles, exactly who he was, the man who had destroyed her family. The Jiang family of Qinghe County, scholars, philanthropists, 100 years of good name, had declined his marriage offer on the grounds that their only daughter deserved better than a serial abuser with a famous surname. So the Xiao family had removed the Jiang family from existence, and the county had watched it happen with its hands in its pockets, because who speaks up against 2 Dharma-form elders? She'd escaped the night of it, hidden across 3 counties, rebuilt herself into a veiled musician in a border city, and here he was again, having tracked her down, shopping. I will hate you until I die, she told him, calm as a signature, and then she stepped onto the stool and went out the window. Because dying on her own terms was the one purchase he couldn't outbid. Ling Yu moved before I did, out the window, caught her mid-fall back through the window, and met Xiao Feng coming the other way. because the young lord had lunged after her with the entitled reflex of a man chasing dropped property. Ling Yu's open hand put him through the far wall. His sea transformation bodyguard, 2 full realms above my friend's visible cultivation, came in swinging with enough force to shake the building. I quietly reinforced the tower a millionfold with a flick, a courtesy to the musicians downstairs, and Ling Yu met the man's punch with a bare fist at 80%. The bodyguard's arm lost the argument, then his chest lost the war, and what landed in the corner was no longer a combatant. My refined scholar friend, it turns out, punches like a landslide when he's angry. And he was angrier than I'd ever seen him. No poetry, no fan, just a man holding a trembling stranger upright with one arm and looking at Xiao Feng the way winter looks at a late harvest. Xiao Feng, for his part, cowered on the floor, screaming his family name like a spell that had always worked before. I handed Ling Yu a jade token, one of mine, loaded with enough power to kill anything below King Realm. With this, no one below a king can touch you. Don't be soft. Then Fugui and I went home and let him work. The next day, the Xiao family of Qingling County, all 1,000 years of it, stopped existing. The city processed it with the moral seriousness of a crowd at a fireworks show. Within a day, storytellers were selling the tale of the gentle scholar who raised a clan for a beauty, and within 2, the Xiao family's ledger of horrors had come spilling out. The bullied, the robbed, the vanished children rumored to have gone into the old ancestors' longevity pills. Public opinion did a full flip from "how cruel" to "what took so long?" In the palace, Emperor Jin stared at a portrait of the capital's 3 famous good-for-nothings and felt a headache coming on. All 3 of us had become monsters in the space of a season, and it had all started, he noted grimly, the day of that annulment. He was starting to suspect he'd hedged the wrong bet. A few days later, Ling Yu returned my token, and Fugui, who'd assumed the obvious, started teasing him about wedding dates. Ling Yu shut him down flat. He admired misrule. He'd avenged her because it was right and because it was Tuesday. But marry her? Liking someone doesn't mean you must have her, he said, and his gaze drifted somewhere past the garden wall. I want to see the world first, all of it. Settling down is for a much older me. 99% of people are born, live, and die within 100 miles, he said, and he refused. The world is big. He wanted to see it. I looked at my brothel scheduling, clan erasing, secretly profound friend and raised my cup. I support you. 2 men, 1 bird, and a talking book drank to the horizon. The horizon, unbeknownst to it, was in a lot of trouble. The week before the tournament, my 4th bloodline seal cracked open on its own. My cultivation had finally caught up to it. And the flood of bloodline power shoved me from early quasi-emperor to the middle stage while significantly upgrading my golden body. For anyone else on this continent, that jump represents several thousand years of careers. For me, it was Tuesday's passive income. I was starting to understand my grandfather's investment strategy. Seal the baby like a savings bond, let him mature. Then came the Junlin banquet, and I attended the Empire's most prestigious youth tournament the way retired people attend chess in the park. The square before the palace was packed to the walls. My friends and I helped ourselves to seats on the VIP platform. Nobody stopped us. Nobody stops anyone these days. We have a reputation. And I got to work on the imperial snacks while the plot arrived on schedule. A delegation from the neighboring Junyi country showed up mid-ceremony. An envoy, a 3rd prince named Chu Yu, and 3 young prodigies whose entire job was to embarrass Great Jin at its own party. Their opener, a big lad named Dai Hong, leapt into the ring, announced his sea transformation cultivation like a man reading his own trophy inscription, and asked if anyone dared. What followed was 2 hours of decent television. First, an unknown named Fan Yue answered Dai Hong's challenge, a fresh sea transformation breakthrough nobody had scouted, which set both the emperor and the foreign prince flipping through their mental dossiers in visible alarm and lost respectably. Then a local wolf-eyed maniac called Cao Deng vaulted the ropes, shouting he'd win in 1 move. The crowd knew him, the little wolf king of Changlin Mountain, famous for once gouging out a man's eyes over a dirty look, a slasher film villain in a sports bracket. He flattened Dai Hong in the promised single exchange, told him to get off his stage, and then gave us the match of the day against Junyi's 2nd genius, He Jian, a cagey duelist who kited him around the ring waiting for the berserker to gas out. Except the berserker was acting. Cao Deng ate hits on purpose, sold exhaustion like a market vendor, and when He Jian finally committed, exploded through his guard and nearly bisected him at the waist. The referee had to physically catch the blade. "You're the idiot," Cao Deng told his gasping opponent, strolling off. "You really thought I was a brute?" I liked him immediately. Wasted talent for theater, that man. Then Junyi's closer took the stage, Qin Yun, elegant, white-robed, sixth layer, the kind of handsome that made half the crowd's daughters audibly recalculate, and ended the fun. He put the wolf down in 3 moves, gentle as filing paperwork. He outlasted our 5th prince and his famous Thunder Spirit battle body in a half-hour marathon that emptied the local bench. The home crowd's mood curdled into national embarrassment. The foreign prince smiled wider with each round, and the whispers started auditing which absent geniuses might have saved us, until Gu Lingyu stood up, dusted his robe, and said the words he'd been saving all afternoon. Big shots always appear last. He then fought the whole final while using Qin Yun as a whetstone, and I got to watch a foreign prodigy live through the full arc of that discovery. Round 10. Confusion. This opponent has real cultivation and the technique of a man punching wasps. Round 30. Suspicion. He's getting better mid-fight at a visible rate, like a sponge in a rainstorm. Round 50. Horror, spoken aloud. "You're using me as a whetstone?" Ling Yu, courteously matching him layer for layer, while photocopying his entire move library in real time, offered no comment. When Qin Yun finally lost patience and committed everything to one finisher, my friend shrugged and revealed one more layer of cultivation, at which point the pride of Junyi said the most dignified thing available. "I'm not playing anymore, I concede," and left the ring and possibly competitive martial arts. Ling Yu cupped his hands after him and expressed sincere hope for a rematch, with the earnest cruelty of a man asking his textbook out to dinner. 10,000 people chanted my friend's name. His own grandfather, the Grand Tutor, sat on the platform looking like he'd just learned his cat could file taxes. Fugui placed 4th and collected 70,000 spirit stones and a bone-mending pill with the joy of a man who owns 11 treasures worth more than the empire. "I've never been so rich," he said, glowing, factually wrong. Me? Halfway through the tournament, I'd gotten bored and done a sign-in from my seat. 100 million top-grade spirit stones. Again. I sat in the middle of the cheering crowd, quietly drowning in money nobody on this continent could even count to, watching children fight over pocket change. The rich have problems, too. Nobody believes us, but we do. One more visitor came before I left Great Jin. The Prince of Fiancee finally got his audience. I was out of seclusion and out of excuses. And the old man bowed low and apologized for the annulment. I looked at him and found, to my surprise, no anger left to spend. Once upon a time, our families had been close. Then I'd been trash, and people are realistic about trash. The past is the past, I told him, and meant it. He left with something unsaid still sitting in his mouth. I didn't chase it. Whatever the Fiancee family's story was becoming, it wasn't mine anymore. I'm told his daughter later became a saintess of some holy land, transformed, radiant, humble. Good for her. Genuinely. The best revenge is not needing any. The last month was logistics. I refined 2 more Emperor weapons, the Chaos God Clock for my soul, the Giant Spirit Battle Armor for everything else, which, with the sword, gave me a full Emperor-grade loadout plus my father's 3-strike pendant as insurance. I built my friends their arsenal too, summoned a few hundred top-grade spiritual artifacts into the garden air, and told them to pick 3 each. Watching them hyperventilate over the selection, Fugui agonized between an escape shuttle and a fortress tower until I let him take both, was better entertainment than the tournament. And then it was time. The whole household gathered in the back garden, and I did the thing I'd been dreading, which was say goodbye to people who'd bet their lives on me back when I was worth nothing. Uncle Gao got a storage ring with 3 billion spirit stones across all grades, a mountain of pills, a top-tier cultivation manual, and a golden token loaded with my power, enough to kill anything below a saint. The mansion is yours. Anyone who wants to leave, let them. If trouble comes, use the token. The old man wept openly. Ye Ling and Su Hua got dowries and instructions to marry someone worthy, which produced more crying. Shenlong knelt and swore to await my return. I pulled him up and slipped a strand of protective power into everyone present, one last airbag under everything. Then little Azure spread wings the size of sails, took me, Chen Wei, Fu Gui, and Ling Yu on her back, and lift it off. I had her flare her full 8th tier aura over the capital as a parting gift, a year's worth of nobody touches this house insurance written across the sky. Below us, Uncle Gao and the others stood motionless in the garden until we were out of sight. In the palace, Emperor Jin watched us go with an expression I chose not to read. And in one small courtyard, a woman I might have married in another life watched the sky with steady eyes. "Where to first?" Ling Yu asked. Yunzhou City, heart of the province. Population, hundreds of millions. Reputation, the big leagues. Spoiler, it was not the big leagues. But it thought it was, and that's where the fun lives. Yunzhou made the capital look like a farmer's market. Arenas, auction houses, an alchemist guild, streets so rich that King Realm ancestors counted as celebrities rather than myths. We landed in the open, because an 8th tier mount is its own diplomatic passport. The city guards took one taste of Little Azure's aura and developed sudden fascinating interests in the opposite direction. I handed my 3 friends 100 million low-grade stones each, pocket money, stop looking at me like that, and turned them loose on the market district. 20 minutes later, Fugui came sprinting back, holding a bronze fragment the size of his palm. "Boss, appraise this." I looked at it and genuinely stopped walking. It was a fragment of a quasi-emperor weapon. Dao Rhymes long dead, but the material alone outvalued a sacred artifact, which is to say, it outvalued most kingdoms. He'd bought it off a street stall for 80,000 stones because it weighed funny. This man's luck deserves its own religion. The stall's owner, a wiry, middle-aged hunter type named Guan Fei, nearly fainted when we came back. He assumed a refund. Then assumed a robbery, then landed on the correct assumption, which was payday. What followed was 5 minutes of world-class haggling between him and Fugui, 2 professional liars circling each other with complete mutual respect. "Where'd you find it? What's it worth? 1 million? 5 million? 3 million? Deal." The fat man lowballed the location fee for a priceless artifact fragment and made the seller feel like a lottery winner. I watched my friend work and understood, not for the first time, that of the 2 of us, I'm not the scary one. The trail led to Lu's Valley, a swamp 3,000 miles out, an old crater, I realized on arrival, punched by some quasi-emperor battle at least 100,000 years ago. I swept the ground with divine sense and pulled 12 more fragments out of the earth, 13 total, nowhere near a full weapon, just shrapnel from something that had shed pieces mid-apocalypse. I gave the lot to Fugui. He tried to refuse. He physically vibrated with the effort of trying to refuse. Then he split shares with Ling Yu and Chen Wei like a proper merchant. And I decided the moment called for a demonstration. "Do you know what this is?" I took out my thunder trident and tossed it upward, casually. The sky broke. The trident ripped a black hole through the firmament of the world, void storms howling out of the crack, the works. My 3 friends turned the color of rice. I stood there, equally stunned, for a different reason. I hadn't actually meant to do that. I flew up, patched the heavens like a man spackling drywall, and came back down to 3 faces that had aged years. "This world is too fragile," I announced, which was true, and also me covering. "Boss," Fugui said carefully, "how strong are you?" "Only a tiny bit stronger than you. Work hard, and you'll catch up." Lying to your friends is wrong. Lying to your friends this specific way is hilarious, and I'd apologize if I meant it. A venerable old monster showed up mid-cleanup to investigate the sky damage, took one look at me, decided he could bully some kids, and pressed his aura down on the group. I told him, one word, to scram. The word hit him like a cart. He bowed mid-air and evaporated with the fastest "my apologies, I'll take my leave" ever recorded in provincial history. My friends pretended very hard not to have seen their boss verbally concuss a venerable. We're all growing in our own ways. Back in Yunzhou, we settled in for a proper stay. The Xuanyue auction house, one of the region's giants, was holding its once-a-decade top auction in half a month, and my friends wanted to see rich people fight with numbers. I sent them into the local Linglong pavilion to buy real martial techniques. They came out clutching top Earth-rank scrolls and complaining bitterly about a 10% currency exchange fee. 3 young millionaires scandalized by bank charges. Me, I bought the pavilion's whole stock of spirit fruits, aged wines, and beast cores on the way out. 3 billion stones, roughly half a year of the branch's revenue. The manager personally escorted us off the premises glowing like a lantern. Then I enrolled my friends in fight school, or as the locals call it, the Tianluo Fighting Arena, a betting pit where anyone can climb in and earn a cut of the wagers. My 3 all had realm to spare and the combat instincts of houseplants. A season of live fire sparring against real killers was exactly the medicine. Fugue's first opponent was a local legend named Gu Shu, 26 matches, 26 losses, undefeated in defeat, a man the arena openly used as a mercy match. The odds board basically apologized for the fixture, whereupon Gu Shu beat my friend in under 100 exchanges and then stood there, sincerely baffled, asking, "Brother, how are you worse than me?" The crowd rioted. Refunds were demanded. Management sent guards. Fugue and Chen Wei spent the following week getting folded by everyone on the card. They got affectionately dubbed 2/3 of the 3 weakest men in the arena, alongside their new friend Gu Shu. And they improved at an alarming rate, because there is no teacher like public humiliation with a live audience. Ling Yu, naturally, quietly racked up a win streak. Some men are just born with the cheat codes of temperament. Auction day. The Xuan Yue building had a queue of Dharma form experts wrapped around it like a scarf. We had a heaven-grade VIP box, acquired the easy way. I'd sent Little Azure to make the reservation, and it turns out an 8th-tier beast doesn't fill out forms, and the only heaven-grade box ranked above ours belonged to the 7 Stars sect, who I was fairly confident wouldn't be causing me problems, what with my portrait hanging in their ancestral hall. Problems found us anyway. They took the form of a purple-robed young master hammering on our door and shrieking that Box 2 had always belonged to the Cao family. Cao Lei, youngest son of the head of the Cao family of Yangling, the #1 family of the province in both power and self-esteem. He sized up Chen Wei, clocked him at first layer C transformation, did the aristocratic math, weak servant equals weak master, and offered us a choice between surrendering the room or being thrown out of the building. Chen Wei, who has absorbed entirely too much of my personality, replied, "Are you done talking? Then get lost." The manager arrived before the slap Cao Lei threw could land, killed it mid-air, and told him, publicly, delightfully, that the auction house decides its own seating chart and the exit was available. Then the old fox came into our box, all smiles, handed me a purple gold VIP card, valid across every branch in the region, and introduced himself as Manager Wei. Commerce has the best manners of any religion. The auction itself was 3 days of quality entertainment. The auctioneer, a woman named Situ Bing, with a voice like warm honey and total command of 3,000 bidders, walked out to a hall full of cultivators who all simultaneously forgot what they'd come to buy and ran the floor like a conductor. An 8th-grade longevity pill opened the show and sparked a bidding war between 5 VIP boxes that ended at 4 times estimate. From there, she kept the room at a boil for hours. My friends snapped up toys, a realm-concealing robe for Ling Yu, because of course the sneak bought more sneaking, a combat puppet and millennium wine for Fugue, a formation plate for Chen Wei, who'd been quietly devouring formation manuals since that free book in the capital. And then the finale tier arrived, and the first grand item made the whole hall gasp. An 8th-tier beast core, the crystallized power of a king realm monster, proof that someone out there could kill king-level beasts. The bidding climbed through the great families like a fever until I ended it from our box at 1 million high-grade stones, the kind of number that makes a silence. And when the pretty attendant delivered it with ceremony, I said thank you, turned, and fed it to my bird. On the spot, Little Azure swallowed a kingdom's ransom in one gulp, grew briefly larger to accommodate her satisfaction, shrank back onto my shoulder, and burped. Manager Wei's professional smile developed a visible structural crack. Somewhere behind it, you could hear his soul asking, "He bought that as a snack?" The real finale was a black gold token, entry to the Tianyuan secret realm, a pocket world built by an ancient saint king, opening once a millennium in about half a year, as it happened, with rumors of sanctification opportunities inside. The room lost its mind. Kings bid like gamblers on a sinking ship. Fugue turned to me with his whole face asking, and I shook my head and flipped him a token of our own. The system had signed one in for me weeks ago. "But there's only one. I'll walk you in. Doors are for people without me." The Seven Stars sect won the auction copy for 2.1 million high-grade stones, and we strolled out into the evening while, behind us, half the King Realm population of the city began stalking the winner. They jumped him before we'd finished dinner. 5 kings ambushed the Seven Stars Elder over that token in the skies above the city, mountains shattering, millions cowering, the usual. And mid-brawl, the bleeding elder spotted me on the street below and made the best decision of his life. He dove out of his own battle, screaming, "Señor, save me!" His pursuer's final act was to demand I mind my own business. I told them the truth. I hate robbers more than anything in this life. Then a giant hand came out of the sky and squeezed. 5 kings, 5 storage rings drifting down like confetti, 0 further commentary from the heavens. The city's top powers watched from their towers as the pecking order of their entire province quietly reorganized itself. The white-robed elder of the auction house called me an invincible king. He was underselling it by several tax brackets, but I appreciated the energy. My friends split the loot, gagging at the poverty of King Realm elites. 5 rings between them barely held 2 million high-grade stones. "These kings are broke," Fugui said, wounded, a boy who owned 13 fragments of a quasi-emperor weapon, complaining about other people's savings. Oh, and mid-rescue, Cao Lei had come back with 8 Dharma form guards and 2 Heavenly Palace elders to avenge his box-related humiliation. I snapped my fingers, and the muscle evaporated. Lingyu and Fugui personally handled the young master with the patient thoroughness of men who'd been called country bumpkins once too often. When the Seven Stars ancestor arrived to collect his wounded elder, he found the number 1 family's heir marinating in a crater and wisely asked no questions. Grateful sect, the Seven Stars. My portrait works hard. The Cao family, regrettably, did not read the room. The next morning, the family head himself, Cao Jiang, materialized over the city howling about his murdered son, and behind him, an even older ancestor lurked in the clouds as backup. I'll be honest about my motive here. I needed directions. Qingyun's state, where the secret realm was, sat dozens of states away, and I had no map. The head of the province's top family seemed like a man who'd know the way. So I pressed a palm on his head, read the root out of his memories, offered to also hear out his grandfather, the old man in the clouds declined by attacking, and stopped existing. And when Cao Jiang chose to self-destruct rather than talk further, I let the province's most deserved vacancy open up. 2 more storage rings for the boys. Yunzhou City exhaled as one organism when Little Azure lifted off the next dawn. Some cities you improve by arriving, some by leaving. 7 days' flight brought us to Qingyun State, a genuine major state, home to a Holy Land grade sect with a 100,000-year legacy, and to the ancient profound mountains, where the Tianyuan secret realm slept behind its once-a-millennium door. Half a year early. The mountainside was already crawling with King Realm squatters, waiting to rob future token holders. And a crew called the 5 Ghosts of Qishan surrounded us on arrival with the traditional hand over the tokens or die. I'd had a long trip. I hate robbers, I said, once, and the 5 Ghosts of Qishan became a red weather event. The surrounding campers spent the next several minutes complimenting each other on not having moved first. As for the realm itself, doors are for people without me. I walked us through the wall. Inside was a pocket world the size of half a province. No fly restrictions, layered formations, 8th-tier peak beasts patrolling like groundskeepers. And at the center, a sealed ancient city that even saints couldn't crack. We teleported past all of it. In the central palace, a white-robed old spirit blinked into existence and demanded to know how we'd entered before the opening. "Walked in," I said. He processed that for a moment and gave up. Then he defaulted to procedure. To claim the Saint King's legacy, one must pass the trials. I asked him if his master was still alive. He was the city's artifact spirit, obviously, not some leftover projection. And the old ghost nearly fell out of the air. First guest in 100,000 years to clock him at a glance. We got to chatting. His verdict on his own creator: talented, paranoid, allergic to risk, probably still alive, and possibly an emperor by now. The legacy on offer: the Saint King's personal cultivation notes, a star map of his travels, and the ancient city itself, a fortress equal to a Saint King weapon. The trials guarding it had filtered out every visitor for 100 millennia. They took me about as long as a customs queue. I collected the notes and the star map for myself. The notes would feed my friends for decades. The map I had plans for. Then I pointed at my three and told the old spirit, whoever tests best gets the city. He looked at their aptitudes with the expression of a man asked to choose the best of 3 potatoes. But the potatoes had been marinating in my resources for months, and the trial run surprised him. Ling Yu won, of course, the comprehension monster of our trio, and walked out with a Saint King's fortress shrunk to the size of a paperweight in his palm. His face did something complicated, gratitude with a floor of steel under it. Brother Wang, if you ever need me, I waved him off. 12 years of friendship doesn't need receipts. And then, because the realm was open and empty, and technically it was all just lying around, we spent 2 weeks on the most profitable camping trip in history. I set up a table, chairs, fruit, and wine on the shore of the realm's Great Lake, an inland sea covering 1/10 of the whole pocket world, and fished from a deck chair while my 3 friends and the birds strip-mined the landscape in shifts. They'd stagger back to camp every day or two, storage rings bulging, competing over hauls like fishermen. 300 top-grade spirit herbs, 2 actual sacred herbs, mystic gold, ancient beast bones, spirit jade by the cartload, Fugui keeping a running ledger out loud because numbers are how he experiences joy. The lake's landlord, an 8th-tier peak flood dragon, the realm's apex resident, surfaced at one point to object to my fishing, took a single close look at what was holding the rod, and pivoted mid-roar into diplomacy. We came to an arrangement wherein I borrowed 2 of his legs and a slice of liver for dinner, nothing an 8th-tier constitution doesn't regrow by solstice, and paid him a sacred herb worth 10 of him for the inconvenience. He wept. Actual dragon tears, plopping into the lake like coins. I want that on the record. I made a dragon cry by overpaying him. The barbecue was spectacular, the liver was better. And somewhere in that beast's long future is a breakthrough funded entirely by his own left thigh. We strolled out through the wall 6 months before the grand opening, past the same camped kings who watched us exit a sealed realm carrying its whole net worth and began, very quietly, to reevaluate their winter plans. What awaited the 3,000 token holders at the Millennium opening was going to be an empty building with our chopstick wrappers in it. I'd feel guilty, but the system was about to teach me what real looting looked like, and this would retroactively become a rounding error. We rented a courtyard in Qingyun Holy City, the sect's own capital. There, Dharma form experts are street traffic, and the rent runs 8,000 high-grade stones a month, formations and spirit gathering array included. I paid a year up front and settled in for the wait, because I'd done the math on my sign-in calendar and made a decision that required the one resource no cultivator respects: patience. 365 accumulated sign-ins equals 1 annual sign-in, guaranteed immortal rank treasure. I was going to hoard every single daily until I hit the number, and the city had enough restaurants to make the wait civilized. Well, almost every daily. The first week, I cheated a little, and the city rewarded me. 100 million tons of ancient starry gold, a medal for forging emperor weapons, where a palm-sized piece weighs 10 tons. File that away, it becomes a boat later, plus 100 million spirit crystals, each worth 10,000 top-grade stones, and 3,000 years of cultivation that nudged me to the late stage of quasi-emperor. Also a 9th-tier beast core, which went where all the best loot goes, into the bird. 9th tier is saint equivalent. Little Azure couldn't digest it raw, so I inscribed a slow-release seal on it, and she spent the next months on the courtyard tree absorbing a saint through a straw. Then I went to pay my respects to the local overlords, by which I mean, I heard the Qingyun sect had once produced a quasi-emperor, and my system pays bonuses for prestigious real estate, sign-in tourism. The sect's protective formation was actually quasi-emperor grade, the first security system on this continent worth the name, so rather than pick the lock, I knocked. Floated above their mountain gate with my aura politely uncovered. The entire sect went to high alert, and the sect leader himself came out, Hong Ming, an actual Saint Realm powerhouse, 8,000 years old, manners like polished jade. I gave him my surname and a story assembled from 50% truth and 50% atmosphere, and he served me tea. Not just tea. Linglong Xuen, brewed from a 100,000-year-old mother tree, 2 ounces produced per century, reserved for guests the sect is actively afraid of. One sip carried more spiritual energy than a top-grade herb and a Tao rhyme that polished the mind like a lens. I complimented it honestly, and he pressed 2 boxes of it on me with the smile of a man buying flood insurance. Afterward, he went straight down to the sect's forbidden ground, where their true ancestor lived in seclusion, and asked what I was. A quasi-emperor, the old man said. We must never provoke him. In the recorded history of their region, quasi-emperors existed in single digits and hadn't been seen in millennia. Hong Ming, 8,000 years of cultivated calm, walked out of that meeting sweating. From then on, the sect treated me like a live volcano that had wandered in asking for snacks. An open pass to every corner of the mountain, and standing orders that any disciple who offended me would be personally erased by management, which made my sign-in vacation extremely comfortable. I strolled the peaks punching my daily card, and the sect's long inheritance paid out immediately, and I mean immediately. My first 3 sign-ins on their mountain produced a quasi-emperor formation diagram, a quasi-emperor sword art called the 9 Heavens Thunder Control, and a quasi-emperor cultivation scripture, 3 in a row, the system practically applauding the real estate. The sword art alone was worth the trip. I learned it to perfection in 1 hour. The system installs technique the way it installs cultivation, straight to the bone, no decade of forms, and celebrated by accidentally splitting the void twice from my guest room. Then sat there full of a new and useless power, because who exactly was I going to duel? The neighborhood's apex predator was the nervous saint pouring my tea. Strength with no one to spend it on is a specific kind of wealthy loneliness. I journaled about it over a pot of Linglong Xuan and got over it by lunch. Days of strolling later, the sign-ins were still paying. UN magnetic gold, heavenly godwood, a supreme rank sword, top-grade spirit soil, and one item that made me laugh out loud, a 100,000-year-old ancient tea tree, the very species I'd just been served. I hiked up Lingyuan Peak to see the original, and found 2 people playing chess under it, the sect's #1 disciple, Hao Jun, King Realm at 120 years old, a genuinely impressive young man, and a woman in a green dress with skin that glowed faintly from within, who was not a woman at all, the tea tree's spirit, out for a stroll. Her name was Linglong Xuan, same as the tea, and when Hao Jun called me senior, I finally hit my limit on the word. Don't call me senior, I'm 18. Hao Jun made a sound like a stepped-on flute. The tree spirit just looked at me, nodded, and said, I believe you. I can feel your life force. You're barely a sprout. A 100,000-year-old plant called the terror of the eastern region, a sprout, and it remains one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me. Hao Jun spent the rest of the conversation quietly reevaluating his life. At 18, he'd been ordinary. At 18, I was the thing his ancestor lost sleep over. We're different, I told him gently. Don't compare. It didn't help. It never helps. The sect's scripture pavilion swallowed me for days after that. 100,000 years of accumulated books on beasts, plants, formations, history, everything. Realm I had, education I did not, and a man who can shatter mountains but doesn't know what he's looking at is just an expensive accident. I read until Hongming personally came to fetch me for the decennial main event, the Qingyun Dao Gathering. There, top prodigies from the surrounding 100 states compete, while a dozen Holy Land masters watch from the podium. I improved the event. The undercard was solid. 2 young saints from visiting Holy Lands, one with a 9-shao holy body, one born under auspicious omens, hammering each other so hard that every stray shockwave could shave a mountain. But after the 10th flawless exchange, I leaned over and asked my host whether the gathering carried prize money. It did not. Tragic. So during a lull, I took out a sacred artifact spear, genuine saint-grade weapon, the kind of thing whole Holy Lands own one of, hung it in the sky, and announced it would go to the day's best fighter. The young prodigies below ignited, and then a burly holy lord on the podium, Guo Han, master of an whole Holy Land, a saint who became a king at 100 and a saint at 3,000, leaned over and asked, with zero shame, whether adults could compete. I want you to appreciate this. A dozen Holy Land sovereigns, the region's living legends, sat there there vibrating with the exact same question, all pretending to judge him. So I said yes, on the condition that they seal their cultivation down to first layer king realm, and personally sealed Guo Han on the spot with one finger, which taught the podium two things. The prize was real, and so was I. He blinked at the seal, went pale at what it implied about me, and jumped off the podium anyway, because a sacred artifact was a sacred artifact. More than 10 holy lords stampeded into a youth tournament after him. The prodigies screamed foul. Guo Han's rebuttal was eternal. I became a king at 100. I am a young talent. What followed was the funniest afternoon in regional history. 6,000 years of combat experience in first-layer bodies, bullying the entire under 150 division, ancient sovereigns pulling schoolyard feints on children, 2 holy lords eliminating each other in a double knockout over positioning, and the sect elders in the stands watching their own bosses disgrace themselves for hardware with expressions I will treasure until the end of time. The last 4 standing were all holy lords. The audience's young hopefuls sat in the dirt with their worldviews around their ankles. The sect's Hao Jun finally saved regional dignity. He excused himself mid-tournament, came back an hour later 1 full realm heavier, a spontaneous breakthrough, so conveniently timed that his sect leader wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, fought the exhausted Guo Han to a standstill, and then produced a black staff that made the crowd inhale. A sacred artifact of his own, clearly pressed into his hands backstage by management. He clubbed the old saint off the stage with it. Guo Han, sitting in the crater, spat twice and reviewed his life choices at volume. The youth have no martial virtue. Bullying a 6,000-year-old man with a borrowed artifact. This from the man who'd entered a children's tournament that morning. I awarded the spear to Hao Jun with full ceremony, while Hong Ming accepted congratulations on his disciple's natural talent with the serenity of a cat in cream. Guo Han left muttering that his mistake had been insufficient shamelessness. He should have opened with talismans, which, from him, was practically philosophy. I finished the sect's whole library, left a sacred artifact behind as tuition, and went home to my courtyard to wait out the calendar. And in the interest of fairness, I should report how the Tianyuan Secret Realm's grand opening went, half a year later. For the 3,000 token holders, they found gravel. The Qingyuan expedition came home in a state of open mourning. One elder had fought 3 beasts for a single leftover herb. Another had tried to poach a fish from the Great Lake and been chased 30,000 miles by a flood dragon with, and I quote, some kind of personal grudge. I fed that dragon. I regret nothing. The night my counter hit 365, I sat alone in the courtyard for a moment with the sheer size of the year behind me. 19 now. Then I stood up, cracked my knuckles, and said the words I'd been saving for 6 months. System, annual sign-in. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have obtained an innate treasure, the Chaos Divine Gourd. The description scrolled and my hands started shaking. A gourd born at the creation of the universe, first fruit of a chaos vine, engraved with 3,000 laws. Function 1. Eat anything. Function 2. From what it eats, condense something called chaotic source fluid, a liquid miracle. 1 drop, 10,000 years of cultivation and 10,000 years of lifespan, straight deposit. It could refine mortals into geniuses, weeds into elixirs, and me into whatever I had the grocery budget for. This wasn't a treasure. This was an exchange rate. The system had just handed me a machine that converts money into power, to a man whose single most persistent life problem was unspendable money. The catch revealed itself immediately because I'm a scientist at heart. I fed it my pocket change, 10 billion low-grade stones, and got nothing. Fed it 50 billion mid-grades, a bead of source fluid smaller than regret. The gourd's exchange rate was brutal. A full drop cost about 10 billion spirit crystals worth of material. And feeding it finished products like pills or artifacts was highway robbery against yourself. Raw energy assets only, stones and crystals and herbs. In other words, the machine was real, the fuel was expensive, and my hoarded mountains were suddenly a fuel tank. I drank my first full drop on the spot. 15 minutes later, I was at quasi-emperor peak, and my lifespan had grown by 10 millennia. Everything I'd looted since Great Jin, the king's rings, the Cao family's estate, the secret realm's herbs, I now saw through new eyes. Not treasure, groceries, and the entire continent was about to become my supermarket. We packed to leave the next morning, next stop east, and made it as far as the sky above the courtyard before the bill for my sightseeing came due. Voices mocking from above, trying to escape. 4 parties had tracked us down, layered in ambush like a wedding cake of bad intentions. Front layer, Wang Longtian, holy son of the 100 Refinements Holy Land, ranked 91st on something called the Sealing King List, the Eastern region's official leaderboard of the 100 strongest young kings, flanked by a Saint Realm protector, demanding Lingyu's sacred artifact city. Behind him, hidden, Lu Qiancheng, rank 87, just watching. Behind him, actually hidden, the holy daughter of the Red Dust Holy Sect, Bai Ruo Shui, rank 36, one of the 4 great beauties of the Eastern region, with a granny whose aura ran deeper than the rest combined. I called them out of the sky layer by layer like reading a guest list, which unsettled them more than threats would have. The holy daughter got straight to it. I had broken the rules by taking the Saint King's legacy early and should hand it over. Her sex rules, for their region, applied to me. I stood on my bird with my hands behind my back and asked what their rules had to do with me. And Wang Longtian, who I would later learn worshipped this woman with the fervor of a man who has never once been noticed by her, saw his moment to shine and lunged. He was rank 91 of the 100 strongest young kings in the Eastern region. I slapped him out of existence, mid-sentence, protector and all. The sky went very quiet. And then the Red Dust Granny made the intelligent play, grabbed her holy daughter, and fled 1,000 miles in a blink, which would have worked on anyone I'd met before the gourd. I reached through folded space, brought them back like plucking fruit, and finished it. Heaven itself marked the moment. Red morning clouds swallowed the sky over the whole state, the morning omen for fallen saints, and blood rained for hours on 1,000,000 umbrellas. Lu Qiancheng, the spectator, hadn't run. His protector, wiser than his employers, had calculated that fleeing from me was the one guaranteed death on the menu. So the whole party knelt in the rain instead. I appreciated the math. So I invoiced them. Attempted robbery, fine of 1 billion top-grade spirit stones, payable by family, hostages held until receipt. Lu Qiancheng's face went through despair, arithmetic, and filial confidence in the space of 3 seconds. My father loves me. He'll pay. The gourd was hungry. Everyone was going to help feed it, whether they volunteered or not. Down in the city, a dozen holy lords who'd watched the whole thing from a discreet tower reached a quiet consensus. They had seen nothing, would testify to nothing, and would privately enjoy watching the great sects of the East walk one by one into the wood chipper. Guo Han poured the drinks. I never said thank you, so let it stand here. Gentlemen, you were the smartest people in that whole province. East Sea City, half a month later. The eastern edge of the continent, a coastal megacity that made everything we'd seen before look like a rest stop, and home to Wanxiang Academy, a 100,000-year institution rumored to house an actual quasi-emperor. My plan had 3 bullet points: park my friends somewhere with professional teachers, eat my way through the seafood district, and accumulate sign-ins in a city prestigious enough to pay out well. Also, there was a rumor of dragons in the sea. I had questions about how they tasted compared to flood dragon. Research is important. Lu Qiancheng's father personally delivered the 1 billion top-grade stones at a restaurant over lunch, came himself, bowed, paid, and left without one wrong word, having correctly reasoned that an unknown monster is the most dangerous kind, and 1 billion stones is cheaper than finding out. I released his son with my compliments. The Lu family will be fine. Institutions that can swallow a loss with a straight face always are. The academy was less smooth in the funniest possible way. Its guardian intercepted us at the gate, Wang Zifeng, the rumored quasi-emperor, late stage, the strongest being I'd met on this continent, and visibly could not read my depth, which for a man of his rank was like discovering a locked door in his own house. I told him I wanted my 3 friends enrolled. He said yes so fast the word arrived before the question finished, then set me up in a manor in the Academy's forbidden back mountain and accepted a sacred artifact as rent with the fixed smile of a man being tipped a warship by a stranger. And then the Academy's rumor mill did my favorite thing rumor mills do. It looked at the facts: 3 unremarkable students personally enrolled by the quasi-emperor, orders to treat them well, no explanation, and wrote fan fiction. The theory that conquered the faculty lounge: one of the cops must be the secret son of some future emperor. Probably the Wang kid. He's even got the surname. Within a week, Wang Fugui, fat, cheerful, aggressively average, was being bowed to by department heads who believed his father would one day rule the sky. Fugway assumed the VIP treatment was my doing and strolled through it all, beaming. He never learned the truth. Somewhere in that academy's records, to this day, my best friend is filed under, handle with extreme care, Imperial Bastard. I settled into the back mountain and built a small daily paradise, fishing in the river, browsing the academy's library, farming sign-ins. My household expanded by attitude, if not by number. Hao Shu, the book, turned out to be an unstoppable trash talker who bullied little Azure daily about her stalled cultivation. You still can't break the 9th tier? What kind of mount are you? My master deserves a true dragon at minimum, until the bird's eyes went wet and she flew to me, shouting, Master, little Ink is bullying me again. And the ancient supreme treasure of the great Tao got scolded like a middle schooler. He sulked for a day, muttering that I used to call him Little Bao before the bird came along. And there's something profoundly humbling about mediating custody disputes between a dictionary and a chicken. One afternoon, the golden token I'd left with Uncle Gao went off in my senses like a fire alarm. I was across the continent in a blink. The scene at Prince Xiang's mansion, reconstructed. 4 intruders had attacked the household, and Uncle Gao, innate realm butler, 60-something, 0 combat career, had activated the token and one-punched all 4 into the horizon, including a king realm ancestor, in front of the whole gawking capital. The old man was standing there feeling unsatisfied. I checked his face. That is the exact word for what it was doing, when a second, craftier old monster blinked in behind him and snatched the token clean off his belt. The last surviving ancestor of the Tao family of Yang Ling, come to learn what had eaten his relatives, and thinking he'd just stolen the answer. How do I use this token? He demanded, pressing his aura down on my butler. Or what? I asked, from directly behind him. He spun and threw a King Realm 8th layer punch that would have leveled the capital. It touched me and simply ran out of opinions. I put a palm on his head, took his memories, he'd tracked us through sightings of the bird, which was worth knowing, and let the wind have him. Then I turned around to the whole household sprinting across the courtyard shouting, Your Highness! And honestly, best moment of the month. I stayed a day and renovated their entire existence. One wisp of chaotic source fluid, split 12 ways. Uncle Gao, Shen Long, Ye Ling, and Su Hua came out at King Realm 9th Heaven. Everyone else landed mid-king. The 2 grannies, who'd started the year as ordinary old women, became King Realm elders overnight and sat down very carefully, holding each other's hands. I upgraded the token to Saint King Killing grade, left 10,000 talismans I'd folded during idle evenings, and wrapped the capital in a near-emperor formation with a quasi-emperor weapon as its core, tuned so that even a supreme expert would bleed on the walls. Then I gave 12 brand new kings the only speech I had. This power is for protecting yourselves. Use it for evil, and I'll take it back. But if someone bullies you, fight. Kill if you must. Don't embarrass the house by being polite. Ye Ling took notes. I worry about Ye Ling. On the way home, I passed over Yang Ling and deleted the Chow family's remaining operation. Their ancestor had found the mansion once. There wasn't going to be a second research trip. Back in the back mountain, my calendar quietly delivered the big one. Sign-ins had stacked again, and the Academy's pedigree, emperors had walked those halls, paid out in kind. An emperor-grade robe, the Xuan Emperor's purple gold robe, embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, which fit itself to me like poured shadow. I stood in front of a 2-jong mirror for an embarrassing amount of time. Excellent. Excellent. This is exactly what I deserve. The robe could change its appearance for stealth, but let's be honest about how often I plan to use that feature. Then, a monthly sign-in produced the single most on-brand weapon the system ever gave me, the Dragon Fishing Rod. A top-grade, immortal artifact, a tier of existence this whole world had no living example of, shaped like a golden fishing rod, strung with an invisible line sharper than my emperor sword, ending in a small blue bead whose innocent look concealed enough power to flatten mountains ranges. A fishing rod. For dragons. The system knows me better than my own mother, and my mother packed me a small world of supplies. And then, a space law origin, and 33,000 years of cultivation. I locked the manor, fused the second law, time and space now, a portfolio most emperors would trade their thrones for, and drew down every year of stored cultivation. 2 days later, quietly, without a tribulation, the heavens, I assume, had budget concerns after last time, a 20-year-old broke through to the great emperor realm. The peak of this entire cosmos, the rank that hadn't been publicly minted here in ages. I walked out into the courtyard in my purple gold robe, alone except for the pets, and permitted myself one sentence out loud, because some sentences you've earned. In this world, I am now invincible. The world's response arrived within the hour, carried by Fugui at a run. Boss, some guy named Han Tianyu is talking trash about you to the whole continent. Han Tianyu, rank 4 on the Sealing King list, saint son of the Wuji Palace, one of the 3 ruling giants of the East, a sect with multiple quasi-emperors, personal disciple of a supreme, and, crucially, the most decorated member of the late holy daughter Bai Ruoshui's unofficial fan club. He'd announced to the world that after his imminent breakthrough to saint, he would personally execute her killer. He'd scheduled his own tribulation as a public event, invited the elite of the continent to watch, and put out word that if that Wang person dared show his face, he'd never leave. Let me summarize. A man was throwing himself a coming-of-age party and using my execution as the door prize to impress a woman who was already gone. He's still simping for her after. I stopped myself out of respect for the departed, but the man was a monument to wasted devotion. We'll attend, I told Fugui. It's rude to ignore an invitation with my name on it. The week before we flew out, Little Azure's own big day arrived, her saint tribulation. The Academy's entire leadership turned out to watch, dozens of saints, a handful of venerables, 2 supremes, all wearing the identical sour expression of men who'd cultivated for millennia watching a PET attempt the realm. 27 waves of lightning hammered her for half a day, burning her feathers to stubble, and I made myself stand and watch, feeding her only a thread of source fluid when the damage got real, because a tribulation carried is a tribulation wasted. She screamed through the last bolt and rose from it wreathed in golden fire, and the assembled masters gasped as one because the aura coming off her wasn't just saint. Phoenix. The real bloodline, wide awake now, tens of thousands of times stronger than the trace the herb had lit. My street rescue mount was a phoenix in witness protection. She shrank down, flew over, and asked if she could transform into a human yet. We tried. Nothing happened. How do I transform? She asked, and I realized I was a pet owner who couldn't answer the pet's developmental questions. Hao Shu offered to explain. I vetoed that immediately. Then we flew west to crash a tribulation, half an hour at her new speed to cross distance that had once cost half a month. And below us, the ceremony was already assembled. Hundreds of Holy Land airships parked in the sky before the gates of Wuji Palace, and the top of the young generation gathered like a yearbook photo. 2 ancient treasure ships arrived as we did, and the Sky's Whisper network named their passengers. Du Wu Ying, rank 1 on the Sealing King list, sword prodigy of the Xuantian sword sect. Our Academy's own Jiang Han, rank 3. The 2 of them traded barbs on arrival. Aren't you afraid Shen Kun causes you trouble after his breakthrough? If he breaks through, brother, he's coming for you. While the Yunmeng mountain saintess nodded to both from her palace barge like a swan supervising ducks. Then a golden warship 3,000 feet long tore out of a cloud bank, flying the 9-dragon banner, and the crowd's murmur changed key entirely. The central region had come. Tai Longwei, 3rd prince of the Great Wei Empire, descended with his entourage to clasp arms with the man of the hour, all golden-robed magnanimity, here to sprinkle imperial glamour on a friend's big day. And then, my bird's aura rolled over the venue, and every head turned, and someone breathed, "He came," in the exact tone people use at weddings when the ex walks in. Han Tianyu sat cross-legged on his platform, opened one eye, looked at me across the sky, and smiled like a cat that was about to learn it lived in a dog's house. The whole crowd settled in with the shameless satisfaction of people who'd RSVP'd for a coronation and were now getting a coronation and a duel. He passed his tribulation, I'll give him that. Hours of it, wave after wave, and he shattered the final bolt with his bare fists, which, as tribulation form goes, is legitimate showmanship. He stood there wrapped in fresh saint power in front of the continent's elite, and, instead of, say, thanking his teachers, turned to me and made an offer. Kneel, submit to become his follower, and the matter of the holy daughter would be forgiven. He'd upgraded me, mid-ceremony, from execution target to potential accessory. In front of everyone, on his special day. Somewhere in the crowd, rank 1 and rank 3 exchanged the look of connoisseurs, watching a man saw the branch he's sitting on. I reached across the sky, pulled him to me like a man reeling in laundry, and pressed him to his knees with one thread of imperial pressure. "You've provoked me 3 times, I said, and slapped him. Teeth left. "What do you think happens now?" He screamed about killing me. I slapped him again, crisp as an apple. His honor guard charged, a saint leading black-armored elites, and became weather. The Great Wei Third Prince Cai Long Wei chose this moment to defend his friend's dignity from the sidelines, so I slapped him too, from range, and turned half his royal face into a plum. His Saint King Protector erupted out of the golden warship in fury and got exactly one gesture into his attack before he stopped existing. And then the sky split with a roar of, "How dare you touch my discipitration!" and a supreme, an actual supreme, the tier under the emperors, the ceiling of the visible world, brought a palm the size of a city down on my head. I snorted, and the palm went away. Then I reached into the void, felt around behind space the way you feel behind a bookshelf, and dragged out a bald old man by the neck. "You'll kneel too," I said, and he did, next to his disciple, in front of a continent of witnesses. And here's the detail I treasure. The old man knew. The moment my pressure touched him, he recognized imperial might, understood the food chain instantly. And the look he gave his still ranting student was not fear of me. It was the look of a teacher realizing his disciple had booked the family a group appointment with an emperor. Han Tianyu, meanwhile, had fully snapped. "This is an illusion! Master, break it!" And I decided, out of mercy, to end the show. One motion. The number 4 young talent of the East, gone. His master followed. A black-robed quasi-emperor materialized before the dust settled. Wuji Palace's real duty officer assessed the situation with commendable speed, skipped directly past revenge, apologized on behalf of the sect, and asked what compensation would prevent further deaths. 10 billion spirit crystals. His face spasmed. The number was, apparently, larger than the sect's liquid worth, one of the 3 giants of the East, and they couldn't scrape together my grocery money. The wealth distribution of this continent was becoming a personal disappointment, so he offered a quasi-emperor weapon instead. And I took it, and then, because his heartbreak was so visible it was almost audible, I offered him a buyback. Raise the crystals within a year and redeem it. His eyes lit up like a pawn shop customer's. I'd extorted a superpower and left them grateful for the payment plan. The gourd was teaching me things about myself. The crowd dispersed at flank speed, already rehearsing the story they'd dine on for a century. Cai Longwei sailed home with half a face and a grudge I made a note of, and then, honestly, forgot. The 100 refinements and red dust survivors watched from a distant cloud and elected to switch from vengeance to apology as a sect-wide policy. And I turned east because with the calendar clear, I had actual work to do. I decided to build myself a boat. Not a metaphor. The academies and holy lands all cruised around in 1,000-foot sacred artifact airships. And I, a great emperor commuting by bird, had developed vehicle envy. I had 100 million tons of ancient starry gold from a sign-in, enough for a true emperor-class vessel. The problem, starry gold doesn't melt. To forge it, you need a flame from the absolute top of the fire hierarchy. And Hao Shu, smug as ever, knew where one lived. The Yanmo Abyss, a burning chasm in the great Xiong Empire of the central region, hundreds of thousands of miles of fire country so dangerous even emperors avoided the deep end. At the bottom, the 9 netherworld emperor flame, an immortal rank fire born from the fragment of an immortal king's shattered artifact, marinating in its own power for 100 million years. So we flew to the central region to commit arson robbery. On the way, a young master of the Huang Fu family chased us down in a sacred artifact ship, one of the great clans of the Zhou imperial dynasty. 2 supremes in one household, the kind of pedigree people recite before doing something stupid. He offered to buy little Azure as a gift for a princess. 1 sacred artifact for a 9th-tier phoenix. When I declined, he began to explain who his family was. He got as far as "our Huangfu family is" and became mist. I've reflected on whether I've grown too casual about this, and the honest answer is that when you've cleaned the sky over 3 provinces, the 2 Supremes crowd starts sounding like toddlers listing their older brothers. I left my friends parked at the rim inside a protective circle. One venerable wanderer poked it during my absence and got launched over the horizon like a shooting star, which did wonders for their faith in me, and went down alone. The abyss was tourist country at the top. Fire demons the strength of kings, mindless, lunging at anything warm-blooded, each one dropping a bead of fire essence like a video game that pays out in currency. Deeper, the demons ran saint grade and started showing tactics. Deeper still, I passed a human venerable locked in an educational brawl with a three-headed, six-armed flame giant that fought like a drill sergeant, and filed away the observation that something down here was teaching them. In the middle depths, I met the local landlord, the Red Emperor, Xiong Jin, guardian emperor of the Great Xiong, mid-hunt, in crimson armor, with a crimson spear through the skull of a 1,000-foot fire demon that had been running at quasi-emperor strength before it met him. First fellow emperor I'd ever met socially. He felt my divine sense, swept the area with his own, a tide of it, 200,000 years deep, found me smiling at him, and introduced himself with the wary courtesy of a man greeting a stranger his instruments can't parse. When I gave him my name, I watched him privately conclude that I was either brand new or from off-world, decide both options merited politeness, and revise his manners from young friend to equal in a single sentence. Then I told him where I was headed, and he got sincere in a hurry. The deepest level is a forbidden land. The flame lords down there are emperor grade. An emperor went down once and never came back. When I went anyway, he didn't argue. He tossed me a pure gold token and an open dinner invitation, which, I checked, is emperor for, I hope you don't die, and if you don't, drinks. I liked him immediately. Remember him. The deepest level tried to kill me the moment I entered, so I armored up. Battle armor over imperial robe, sword in one hand, fishing rod in the other, gourd floating over my head like a halo with a food budget. And then, before the boss fight, I did the single most important thing anyone can do on the doorstep of an ancient elemental god. System, sign in. Ding! You have obtained one cluster of 9 Netherworld Emperor Flame. I want to talk about the theology of this. Somewhere below me, an ancient fire tyrant sat on a throne it had held for 100 million years, entirely unaware that the heavens had just issued me a free sample of its own soul. I laughed the whole way down. The flame itself turned out to have evolved a body, a jade-skinned man in dark gold with runes on his face and hair of black fire, and it rose off its throne mid-threat, sensing its own fire wrapped around me like a scarf, and demanded, in genuine existential horror, "How do you have my flame? What are you?" "Your last chance to submit," I said. It chose violence, as ancient tyrants do, summoned 2 emperor-grade fire demons, and the gourd over my head twitched. One pulse of chaos chi. Tens of thousands of miles of the deep abyss simply stopped being there. The bodyguards were gone. The emperor flame was a guttering stub. And I stood in the crater, rereading my own treasure's spec sheet with new respect. Then I fed the tyrant to its own free sample. The 9 Netherworld Emperor Flame, the original, upgraded with its progenitor's whole horde of origin, settled around my shoulders as a robe of dark gold fire. And I'd like to note that between it, the purple gold robe, and the armor, I was now wearing 3 outfits simultaneously and pulling it off. The abyss, unfortunately, noticed its heart being eaten. A fire tide erupted, the once a century kind, with the entire demon population stampeding for the surface. And Xiong Jin threw up a barrier over the chasm, with every expert in his empire feeding it, hissing at the sky about which bastard had stirred the deep. Then a demon emperor from the northwest waste chose that exact moment of human distraction to attack, hurling stars at the barrier. And I surfaced into the middle of a genuine crisis that was, in fairness, entirely my fault. So I handled it. Cut the demon's sneak-attacking claw off with one sword light, froze the beast, a celestial dog the size of a mountain range, 12th tier, in stopped time, and shattered its soul while it stood there like a statue in a museum of bad decisions. Its boss, the demon lord of the Northwest, arrived screaming threats, took one look at the frozen time around his dead lieutenant, and left at a speed that honored his ancestors. I wanted to chase. Xiong Jin talked me down. Kill a demon lord and the whole Northwest boils over, and emperor's wars are paid for in everyone else's blood. Fine. I helped him seal the tide instead, stayed until the abyss quieted, and we parted as actual friends. Also, I kept the dog. This matters because back at the academy, I discovered what a 12th tier demon emperor is for. I set up a cauldron in the back mountain, supreme grade artifact, 9 netherworld flame underneath, and stewed a pot of demon emperor dog meat whose aroma drifted across the whole campus like a siren song. There's an old saying that even immortals jump the wall for the smell of dog meat, and I am here to report it understates the case. Within the hour, every ancient monster on the faculty had assembled at my fence with the shameless faces of cats at a fish market. Saints who hadn't left seclusion in centuries, venerables who taught classes on detachment from worldly desire, all of them sniffing the air and addressing me as senior with sudden warmth. I quoted 10,000 spirit crystals per 10 caddies, expecting outrage. They paid it. They lined up with buckets. One elder ordered 100 caddies, tasted a strip at the fence, turned around, and upgraded to 500. The meat of a 12th tier emperor is a walking spirit pill. Every mouthful carried enough refined essence to fuel a month of cultivation. And these men had been eating dew and virtue for 10,000 years. Wang Zifeng bought 5,000 caddies in one order, threw in several jars of 10,000-year wine from his private hoard, and got drunk with me right there in the garden, the continent's strongest man, flushed pink, pounding the table, shouting that the meat was better than immortal pills, and had to excuse himself early because the stew pushed him to the literal edge of a breakthrough mid-toast. I sold a fraction of one dogleg and out-earned the city's entire arena district's decade. The Chaos Gourd ate the proceeds the same evening. Everybody won except the dog, and the dog had genuinely had it coming. Then, for half a year, I built the boat. The forging became a campus event whether I wanted it or not. When your furnace is an immortal flame and your raw material is 100 million tons of star metal, privacy is not on the menu. The moment word spread that a big shot was refining on Artifact Peak, students stampeded uphill. And the moment the 9 netherworld fire actually rose, the Academy's masters stampeded after them. The chief of the Weapon Peak, a venerable, the region's premier refiner, took one look at the mountain of ancient starry gold hanging in my flame and made a noise usually reserved for religious experiences. A visiting young master of the Wang family, one of the 3 great refining dynasties of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, up the mountain specifically to sneer at provincial craftsmanship, stopped sneering at roughly the same moment, watched for an hour with his whole worldview audibly restructuring, and left having quietly decided on a career change. I shaped the melted gold into a hull in a single pour. High-end materials don't need hammering, they need authority, smoothing a 100-meter vessel to a mirror finish in one continuous act of will, skipping a decade of fine forging out of sheer impatience. Then came the real work, the part no audience can see, 3 days inscribing the nervous system. Hundreds of millions of runes, formation lattices stacked like geology, law marks for every function, from flight to defense to long-range spatial jumps, woven through the metal the way veins thread a body. My eyes crossed twice. Worth it. When the frame was done, I gave it life. A ritual of celestial dog blood poured over the hull, a sacred artifact cauldron swallowed whole to seed its spirit. And then straight up into the gathering clouds, because yes, weapons of that grade must also pass heaven's exam. The tribulation hammered my boat for a full day while I watched from below like a parent at a swim meet. Half the eastern seaboard saw the thunderclouds and drew the obvious conclusion, some hidden emperor forging his life weapon. And the correct experts were too frightened to investigate. And the greedy ones talked themselves out of robbery on the same logic. And the observant ones spent the day troubled by a single detail they couldn't metabolize. The imperial weapon rising over East Sea City appeared to be shaped, for unknowable divine reasons, like a boat. It was shaped like a boat because it was a boat. The Starship, 10,000 feet of midnight blue star gold at parade size, palm-sized in my pocket, an independent world inside with palaces, lakes, gardens, stocked spirit fish, and long-range teleportation measured in light years. My masterpiece. 6 months of my life. Total cost, 1 sign-in of metal, 1 stolen flame, and 1 dog who had it coming. I stood back and looked at my Emperor-class yacht, and the yacht looked back at me. And one thought arrived with the clarity of prophecy. A vessel like this deserves a proper maiden voyage. Somewhere far, somewhere new. The stars, for instance. But first I needed travel money, Real money, the kind that feeds a gourd. And I'd already drained this continent's elite twice, which is how I came up with the single most profitable idea of my first 100 years. If you can't loot them and they've got nothing left to extort, you sell to them. I walked into the East Sea branch of the Xuanyue auction house and told the manager I'd like to consign a few items. He asked what items. I said, 1 quasi-emperor weapon, 10 venerable artifacts, 100 sacred artifacts, and assorted top-grade miscellany for openers. The man's soul left through his ears. Their headquarters' century-grade peak auction had never headlined anything above a Saint King weapon. And within the day, the strongest woman in their whole organization arrived to take my account personally. The profound moon supreme, elegant, moon pale, and sharp as a drawn blade. I gave her a signing bonus, 1 scarlet god pill, my new house product, refined from celestial dog blood essence and 10 million crystals worth of source fluid, and told her to break through to quasi-emperor with it before opening day. Living advertisement. She looked at the pill, looked at me, and became the most motivated employee in commercial history. Then she spent 2 days hand-delivering invitations across the known world. The 3 giants of the East. The Central region's 3 empires and 3 imperial dynasties. The Buddhists of the West, the wild god palaces of the South, the ice clans of the North, the demon race, the barbarians, the dragons. Watching the guest list assemble was its own drama. At the Xuantian sword sect, the sect master personally walked out to greet a mere messenger. Because the messenger was a supreme and the consigner was that lord from Wanshang Academy, a phrase that now opened doors across half the world. At the Great Wei imperial court, the emperor himself rose from his throne to accept the invitation. His son had come home from my last public appearance with half a face. And the old man saw the auction as a chance to buy back into my good graces. Even the demon race got a card, though Xuanyue, showing the survival instincts I hired her for, presented it there as a senior wishes to auction a quasi-emperor weapon, and omitted every syllable of my description. When the day came, East Sea City's sky looked like the end of a board game. Hundreds of Holy Land ships, golden imperial ancient vessels, a floating Buddhist alms bowl radiating sanctity, a black dragon the length of a valley towing a golden dragon palace barge. Species that hadn't shared a room without casualties in 10,000 years, all parked wing to wing, all here to bid on my garage sale. Xuanyue greeted them at the door as a freshly munted quasi-emperor, and when they gasped and asked how, she said, bless her, the auction will explain. The first lot explained it. 1 scarlet god pill, held up in a jade box while Xuanyue announced its resume. Refined from the essence blood of a demon emperor, capable of pushing a supreme across the quasi-emperor threshold, and Fu, the line that made every wrinkled face in the VIP boxes lean forward, even an emperor who takes it gains a decade of lifespan. The demon race's box went so quiet you could hear their dignity leaving, their own dead emperor, rendered into supplements, sold at auction, to their neighbors. They didn't say a word of protest, because what exactly do you say, and to whom? Then the bidding started, and their silence got drowned out anyway. The Dragon Clan's box opened at 300 million crystals, in a voice like rolling surf. Some human, Holy Land, pushed them. And the dragons did the old money thing, doubled, flatly, and invoked their clan name to freeze the room, which triggered the house rule. I leaned on the entire auction hall with a wafer of imperial pressure, 3,000 elite cultivators discovering their lungs had opinions, and clarified, highest number wins. The next being who bids with a name instead of a number experiences using power to bully others from the receiving end. A dragon elder's voice came back thin. Junior offers 5 billion as a number, senior. The hall thawed. The dragons apologized, the dragons apologizing, a sentence I want carved somewhere, and then bought that pill and most of the rest properly, with money, oceans of it, which I respected. They believe their claws are the only weapons worth owning, but medicine that grows lifespan is medicine. And their vaults ran deeper than every human power combined. 3 days, over 1,000 lots. Supreme artifacts hammered down at triple estimate, because no one had ever seen one auctioned. Sacred artifacts went like festival snacks. The finale, a top-grade quasi-emperor weapon, the world-suppressing seal, set off a bidding war between two empires and a barbarian delegation that everyone had assumed was too poor to attend, and closed at 20 billion to an imperial dynasty whose representative sounded personally offended by how much he'd just agreed to pay. Final take: 62 billion spirit crystals and change, plus close to 1 trillion in top-grade stones. Chuanyue announced a sequel auction next month before the hall emptied, and I watched 1,000 of the world's proudest beings file out, already planning what to pawn. I ran 10 more auctions over the following months, monthly, until I had functionally strip-mined the savings accounts of every great power on the planet. 800 billion crystals, all of it straight down the gourd's throat. My cultivation climbed through the back half of Great Emperor like a stairwell. The golden body hit major completion, my soul touched perfection, the 5th bloodline seal opened, and one quiet afternoon, an annual sign-in delivered the newest member of the family. A 9-tailed skyfox cub, 3 days old, snow white, the size of a kitten, 9 little tails and paws like pink erasers, a divine beast, born at the Great Emperor realm. The kitten napping in my palm outranked every ancestor on this continent, and her whole personality was eat, sleep, and lick my finger. Little Frost, we named her. Little Azure was briefly jealous until she realized the fox came with a built-in excuse for more group meals, at which point the two of them formed a food alliance that persists to this day and has never once lost a negotiation. While I was playing Tycoon, the Northwest was playing something older. The Demon Lord had spent 2 years marinating in the memory of my time stop, and his conclusion, reasonable from where he sat, was that I could not be allowed to finish growing. In a hidden cave under his palace, he laid it out for his 3 remaining demon emperors. The human boy killed the Black Emperor before his 20s. Every year he lives, the noose tightens. Strike now or kneel forever. And he had an ace inbound, the Thunder Ancestor, an ancient demon emperor who'd left this world for the stars hundreds of thousands of years ago, and come back monstrous. A name so old that the current Dragon Emperor had grown up on stories about him. The old rock wanted one thing out of retirement, and his eyes glittered when he said it. A prodigy like that, refined into a pill, might push him to the realm beyond emperors. The recruitment meeting at the Dragon Palace was, by all accounts, a masterpiece of bad chemistry. Thunder Ancestor and the Dragon Emperor spent the first 5 minutes measuring auras over an old grudge. The Ancestor had feuded with the current Emperor's father, until the Demon Lord physically got between them, shouting about the fate of 2 races. Then came the pitch. The seas are rich, but the continent is the center. How long will the mighty dragons squat in the water, watching humans own the land? Split the world, he offered, demons and dragons, after the humans fall, with the barbarians of the far south and the ice clans of the far north folded in as enthusiastic cannon fodder who, unbeknownst to them, had been budgeted as ablative armor. The Dragon Emperor demanded a heart demon oath on the split, and got one. A 4-race coalition planned in dark rooms for 2 years, every signature on it hinging on one opening move. Kill the boy in the east before he ripens. They came for me on a quiet morning. I felt 3 sets of divine scents crawl over the manor while I was feeding the fox, and smiled because I recognized the flavor of 2 of them from the abyss. Company, I told the household. The expensive kind. Up in the stratosphere, Thunder Ancestor was giving orders. You 2 probe him first. I'll finish it. Right up until I appeared in front of them mid-sentence and offered to save everyone the choreography. The old rock's answer was to drop the disguise entirely. 3 true forms unfolded over East Sea City. A thunder rock tens of thousands of feet across, wings crawling with purple lightning. A netherwolf inked in death runes. A black dragon armored in dark gold. Each one an apocalypse with a pedigree. Each one armed, a thunder spear the ancestor had torn off a murdered emperor in some other galaxy. A soul-eating banner, a dragon god lance. Emperor weapons, all 3 raised together. The city screamed. The academy slammed up its great shield. Wang Zifeng stood on the wall with his face gray, because he could count. So could I. 3 emperor weapons came down at once, and I met them with the fishing rod. One horizontal swat, like a man clearing cobwebs, the thunder spear, the ancestor's treasure, the trophy he'd nearly died winning, the weapon he'd nursed back to glory for 10,000 years, shattered. And its shards fled, shrieking into the void. The banner and the lance followed before their owners' minds had processed the spear. All three demons staggered in the air, coughing out backlash, their life force dimming with their broken arms. And I watched three ancient faces cycle through the same arithmetic at the same speed. Weapons gone, ambush spent, boy unbothered. The wolf and the dragon turned to flee with the unanimous instinct of beings who'd survived 300 millennia by knowing exactly when a fight was over. "You came all this way," I said. "Stay." The line sang out behind its little blue bead, once a bright arc across the whole sky. It went through three true forms and three demon souls in one pass. And the morning was suddenly very full of very large corpses and very quiet. 10 breaths, start to finish. The Thunder Ancestor, the Doomsday weapon an entire race had waited 300 millennia for, the pill recipe enthusiast, the ace, never finished his opening monologue. I reeled in the line, collected the bodies, a rock, a wolf, a dragon, excellent meat diversity, and looked west because the timing meant the rest of the plan was already in motion. It was. On the northwest border, the Demon Lord stood at the head of hundreds of millions of massed demon troops, everything 7th tier and up his race could field, a horde with its eyes already eating the human cities, facing down 4 human emperors who'd flown out to hold the line. The trash talk had been proceeding on schedule. This continent belonged to the demons first. We're taking back what's ours. When you're all dead, I'll wipe your species to the last infant. The human side's eldest was mid-reply when the Demon Lord felt, across half a world, his Thunder Ancestor stop existing. 4 human emperors watched the invasion's commander flinch at nothing. And then, after one long moment of visible despair, do the thing that tells you everything about what he was. His own emperors urged retreat. We live, we rebuild, we leave this world if we must. He looked at them, and at his army, and something in him went to a place logic doesn't reach. It's all because of that human boy, he said, quite calmly, and threw down an ancient formation plate. Over his own troops, the myriad spirits' sacrifice. Every soldier behind him rendered into blood power for his personal ascension, tens of thousands bursting per breath, 7th-tier veterans and 10th-tier great demons popping like bubbles, the horde's war cries curdling into one continuous scream. His own demon emperors threw themselves at the formation to break it, and got caught in it, because he'd budgeted them too. The human emperors ordered a full retreat and watched, appalled past strategy, as a monarch drank his whole nation. He came out the other side of it swollen with 1,000,000 lifetimes of stolen blood, laughing about how not even the Thunder Ancestor alive could match him now, and turned toward the east with my name in his mouth. I stepped out of the void in front of him, and he didn't even get the sentence out. The rod's bead went through his chest, his formation plate, and his entire century of planning in one cast. The blood power of a murdered army blew away on the wind, ownerless. The 2 demon emperors he'd tried to render died in the collapsing formation beside him, still not sure whose side they'd been on at the end. The great demon invasion of the Tianquan continent, planned for 2 years, prophesied for 10,000, lasted in total most of one afternoon. The 4 human emperors found me standing in the settling red mist and bowed very carefully, radiating the specific gratitude of men who've just watched the exterminator handle both the infestation and the collapsing building, and would now like the exterminator to please leave. The dragons took longer because the dragons, to their eternal credit, did not run. I reached the Western Front as their emperor was screaming the retreat, and when their 5 remaining emperor elders understood that no one outswims a fishing line, they turned around, lit their own dragon souls on fire, and charged me to buy their people time. It didn't work. Nothing was going to work. But I want it written down that the arrogant, gold-hoarding, insufferable dragon race met the end at full wingspan, teeth first. 100,000 dragons refused to kneel. I didn't ask them to. When it was over, the sea rained blood, and the human emperors who'd watched from a respectful continent away descended on the empty dragon palace like seagulls on a dropped meal. And the old monk among them said, Amitabha first, which I thought was a nice touch. Xiangjin came by the back mountain a few days later with a mountain of confiscated dragon treasure. 200 billion crystals, 3 trillion top-grade stones. You mentioned you needed these. He stayed for dinner because I was serving stewed dragon emperor, and he'd been dreaming about that specific old lizard's flesh for 10,000 years. His words. My friends ate dragon and glowed. The fox ate dragon and purred. The bird ate most of a tendon the size of a sofa and asked if there was more. There are worse ways to end a war. One last piece of business closed itself that season. Word came from Great Jin. My ex-fiancée Hao Mei Shou had returned to the capital in glory, saintess of a holy land now, transformed by her years away, gentle and poised where the old princess had been all pride. She visited the mansion. I met her for a few minutes, tea and courtesy, and we talked like two adults who'd once been children in the same story. No barbs, no reckoning. The world had grown us in opposite directions, and hers was a good direction, and that was the whole conversation. Some doors you don't slam, you just close them quietly, and both people are lighter on their own sides of it. Then I gathered my 3 friends and asked the question I'd been sitting on since the boat was born. I'm leaving. Not the region, the planet. Anyone coming? They didn't even pretend to think. Fu Gui whooped. Ling Yu's eyes went wide with the horizon hunger he'd confessed at the hot pot table a lifetime ago. Chen Wei just started packing. I gave them each a drop of chaotic source fluid, the real stuff, and watched 3 certified cultivation failures rocket from sea transformation to the late stage of quasi-emperor in 2 days, their aptitudes rebuilt from the foundation up. Realm without insight, yes, they'd spend a century growing into their own ranks. They had the century. That was the point of the gift. A month later, a 10,000-foot flying palace of blue star gold rose over Great Jin, hung there a moment over one particular mansion, long enough for an old steward and 12 kings in servants' clothes to wave from the courtyard, and then punched through the sky and was gone. Behind us, an whole continent's worth of emperors quietly exhaled. Ahead of us, the stars didn't know what was coming. The stars, it turned out, were mostly empty and extremely dark, which is the great secret of the void nobody puts in the poems. Hao Shu laid out the geography. Our universe, the Yuan Ling realm, was a middle-tier world, one of thousands, and our whole continent, for all its emperors, was a top 1,000 planet in one high-grade star domain among tens of thousands. The nearest truly first-class neighborhood, the Nine Heavens star region, sat 3,000 trillion light-years out, 1,000 years flight for a normal emperor, 10 with Hao Shu navigating shortcuts. 10 years. In a boat with gardens, lakes, a wine cellar, and my entire found family aboard. I slept for 9 of them. Don't judge me. Emperors don't need sleep. Which is exactly what makes it a luxury. And I had a decade, a good bed, and a fox who considered my chest her personal territory. I woke up on approach with 3,862 sign-ins banked and the smug, bottomless calm of the best-rested being in several universes. Little Azure had spent the trip learning to hold human form, a chubby-cheeked girl of 11 or so in blue feather robes, round as a dumpling, and deeply offended by the observation. The annual sign-in celebrated our arrival. 300,000 years of cultivation. A supreme space ability called World in Palm, and Mid, the household's new favorite member, an enlightenment sea tree. A knee-high walking sapling with 49 wisdom leaves growing on its head, feet made of braided roots, and the personality of a shy toddler. It hugged my leg on arrival and would not be detached. We named it Bud. Hao Shu immediately appointed himself its boss and began teaching it the rules of the household. I let him. Everyone needs someone to feel senior to, even a dictionary. Our welcome to the big leagues was somebody else's ambush. While I was in a comprehension retreat and the pets had parked the ship on a dead star, a golden ancient vessel came tearing past with 5 warships on its tail. On its deck, a young woman in blue, holding off 2 Supremes with a pair of quasi-emperor weapons. An old retainer begging her to run. A teenage boy hidden behind her. Standard void banditry, none of my business. Except Hao Shu looked up from bullying the tree and said the 8 words that changed my next century. Master, that woman is related to you. Her name was Wang Fenghua. Her family, the Wang family of the Tianyu star system, descendants of a mainline Wang clan disciple who'd been seeded into this lower world 1,000,000 years ago. Same trial, same tradition, different millennium. Which made these people, however many greats removed, my kin. The first blood relatives I'd met since my parents dissolved in a courtyard. By the time I tuned in properly, the fight had gone desperate. The woman was juggling two quasi-emperor weapons, a purple dagger and an ancient scroll, family heirlooms plainly above her rank, bleeding power to hold off two veteran supremes while her old retainer begged her to take her little brother and run. And she refused, and tried to hold the door alone, and was losing. Gorgeous fighting spirit, terrible math. The masked leaders were mid-gloat. The Wang family can't save you, little girl. No one can with two supremes here, when I appeared next to her in the middle of their sentence. They introduced themselves as elders of the Divine Hall, a name pronounced with the confidence of men who expect it to end conversations, and advised me, as a courtesy, not to throw my life away over strangers. Funny thing about that, I said, and slapped the first one dead on the spirit of the thing, and the second before his colleague's dust had settled. Their 5 warships and hundreds of massed minions broke formation and scattered like startled fish, and made it, collectively, nowhere. Long Fenghua floated there amid the wreckage of an ambush that had just evaporated around her, lowered her 2 overdrawn heirlooms, and bowed with lovely composure for someone whose day had inverted twice before lunch. Her little brother peeked out from behind her and asked, with the fearless rudeness of teenage boys everywhere, whether I was a hidden ancestor. I told her the truth in installments. My surname is also Wang. There's a connection to your ancestors. I'll come along and take a look at this trouble of yours. Her eyes went through surprise, hope, and a long private calculation about what kind of connection produces a stranger who deletes supremes, and she was too well raised to ask, which saved me a conversation I wasn't ready to have on a doorstep. The trouble, when we got the full story on the flight home, turned out to be the oldest story there is. Decades back, a nobody genius named Cui Yuan had courted Fenghua's mother, been declined by her family, and vanished, and then resurfaced years later as a favored son of the Divine Hall, an ancient terror of the 9 Heavens star region that had produced more than 10 actual immortals across its history. Now he was a candidate for their Son of God title, and he was spending his new influence on the pettiest project imaginable, erasing the family of the woman who'd said no. The Divine Hall didn't care. To them, it was a rounding error of patronage. 4 local great clans had been leaned on to besiege the Wang family. The girl and her brother had been ambushed, fleeing to find help. We arrived at the family's home planet to find the siege in progress. Dozens of ancient warships around the Wang stronghold, a dozen home team emperors led by a tough old patriarch named Wang Zhentian holding the wall, and the 4 coerced clans conspicuously not attacking, going through the motions because nobody sane spends emperors on someone else's grudge. The Divine Hall's on-site supervisor, a maid named Chao Jin, with the arrogance of borrowed power at maximum compression, was screeching at 4 ancient patriarchs to raise the walls. And the patriarchs were discovering deep reserves of patience. Into this stalemate descended my Emperor-class ship, and everything stopped, because the locals could read a hull. When the maid ordered the assembled clans to shoot us down, no one so much as twitched. I made it simple. Sent the siblings down to their family, turned to the maid, and gave her a message for her masters. The Wang family is under my protection. Touch them again, and the 9 Heavens star region loses a Divine Hall. She started to laugh at me and finished the laugh 10,000 miles away, coughing blood. The 4 coerced clans apologized in perfect unison, paid a treasure each for startling my relatives, and evacuated with the relieved efficiency of men released from someone else's funeral. And then came a scene I hadn't planned for. Wang Zhentian asked, very carefully, the question his family had carried for 1,000,000 years. "Young master, are you from the Upper Realm Wang clan?" And when I said yes, when I confirmed the story their founding ancestor had left behind, that those who ascend can come home to the primordial ancient realm, a dozen emperors and a whole fortress of my distant blood knelt in the sky. And the old man's beard shook, and I stood there realizing that to these people I wasn't a wandering monster. I was proof. Proof that the road home existed, that the family had never stopped being a family across 1,000,000 years and half a cosmos. I raised them up and stayed. What else do you do? Cui Yuan, informed by his surviving maid, reacted like every small man given a large office. He escalated. His master, the palace lord of the Divine Hall himself, handed him a crimson command token and the elite of their war temple, the Ashura Hall. Hunters with emperor kills on their resumes. They hit the Wang stronghold weeks later with a beam that would have cracked the planet. and I cut their flagship in half from the ground, mid-descent. What spilled out was the most impressive collection of this region's violence I'd yet seen. 3 Emperor Venerables, a rank above Great Emperor. The locals stack extra floors on the building. And 10 Emperors, led by a Vice Hallmaster with hundreds of millennia of slaughter behind him. I'd been needing sparring partners, honestly. I put away the rod, drew the Tai-Ah sword, summoned the battle armor, and waded in bare-knuckled adjacent because you can't buy combat experience, and these gentlemen were offering it free. It was the best workout of my life to that point. The Emperor Venerables could actually pressure me for whole exchanges at a time, genuine veterans, feint stacks and soul attacks, and coordinated law cages, 300 millennia of murder craft. And I let them, blocking with my body, learning their grammar mid-conversation, getting visibly better in a way that made their Vice Hallmaster's eyes go steadily wider and sicker. Somewhere around the 100th exchange, he called the retreat because he'd finally read the room. The monster wasn't fighting them. The monster was taking notes. So I thanked them for the seminar, took out the rod, and reeled the sky. His last expression was heartbreak, not at death, I think, but at learning what tier of food chain he'd actually lived on all those years. Below us, one duel stayed private because it was owed. Fenghua's father, Wang Yanshan, took to the air and called Cui Yuan out by name. You started all of this, end it with me, man to man. Cui Yuan accepted with a sneer. He carried an immortal's legacy. What was some backwater family head? And then spent the fight learning what the Wang clan's backwater legacy was worth, as Wang Yanshan's spear systematically took him apart, joint by joint. Halfway through, Cui Yuan glanced up, saw his Asura Hall backup being fished out of the sky like carp, and lost the last of his nerve. "My master is the palace lord!" he screamed, broken-shouldered, floating in the wreckage of his own decades-long tantrum. "Kill me and he'll never forgive," Wang Yanshan's spear ended the sentence. On the wall of the stronghold, Fenghua's mother watched her husband avenge 30 years of a stranger's obsession, holding her daughter's hand. She'd never once returned Cui Yuan's feelings, never encouraged, never wavered, never even known him well. Her family had nearly burned anyway, for a fantasy running unsupervised in a small man's head. Some villains you inherit, some you're assigned by a stranger's imagination. That left the Divine Hall itself. And here I broke my usual pattern, because a power that sends a second wave after the first one vanishes will always send a third. I went alone to Shura Star, their headquarters, a superplanet 100 times the size of anything in my home system, knocked politely by cutting their grand formation in half with 2 sword strokes, and dismantled the institution. Their palace lord unleashed a 12-banner crimson formation, refined by their immortal founder. The rod's line cut the banners like party streamers. Their council of dying elders played the last card in the deck, burned a token to summon the ancestors' descended projection, an actual immortal's shadow, vast as a god, the ultimate argument of their whole civilization. The bead went through its forehead before it finished materializing its frown. The projection shattered into white light, and with it, 10,000 years of the phrase, "But they have an immortal behind them," stopped working in this star region. Their dying elders made one last stand after the projection fell, a dozen coffin dodgers who'd been rationing their final centuries, deciding in unison that if the ancestor couldn't save them, they'd spend what was left on my face. One of them came at me swinging a pseudo-immortal artifact, a weapon their founder had personally forged. And I recognized the tragedy of the moment, even as I ended it. The strongest heirlooms of a 10,000-year dynasty. And against the real thing, they were expensive souvenirs. When the last of them settled out of the air, I stood over the greatest power of the star region and felt the quiet click of a promise kept. I'd told their maid, "Cross my family again, and the 9 heavens loses a divine hall." Institutions should believe people more. Then I looted the place down to the floor tiles, and I need you to understand what down to the floor tiles means at divine hall scale. 3 treasure vaults hidden in immortal forged pocket worlds. Hao Shu sniffed them out one by one, insufferably pleased with himself, narrating each discovery like a tour guide. Herb fields the size of nations, where emperor-grade medicines grew like dandelions. I harvested everything, ripe or not, on the principle that they wouldn't be needing spring. 800 imperial weapons racked like umbrellas, pseudo-immortal artifacts by the crate. bronze platforms of sealed chests whose worst contents were emperor-grade treasures. And in the deepest vault, on a platform of precious metals, hundreds of ancient rings piled with spirit crystals, trillions upon trillions, the compound interest of an ancient predator that had taxed a whole star region since before my planet had a name. I stood in the vault, genuinely moved, doing emotional arithmetic. All those years I'd been auctioning dog meat to make budget, selling soup to professors, extorting sex 1 billion at a time like a street performer with a very good act. And this was sitting here, in the sky, the whole time, held by people rude enough to attack my relatives. Half an hour it took to pack the entire foundation of the Shura Divine Hall into my storage. Their scavenger rivals arrived days later to pick the corpse and found a building so clean it echoed. The Wang family moved into the renovated premises within the week I gave them the planet. I'd conquered it and had no use for a second house. And Wang Zhentian, upgraded with pseudo-immortal artifacts and a fresh haircut of authority, became the region's newest great power overnight. One neighboring institution, the Tianji Star Palace, took advantage of my brief absence to secretly strip 3 of the Divine Hall's training realms they thought nobody had claimed. Professional work. They even took the jade floor tiles, which, respect. I appeared over their headquarters the next day and offered them 2 options, and they chose the one where they returned everything plus 500 trillion spirit crystals, their whole treasury, I later heard, in exchange for continuing to exist. Their negotiator aged a decade during the hour. The elder who'd led the looting expedition got sentenced by his own furious sect to 100,000 years of punishment duty. Crime doesn't pay, it transfers. And then I went into seclusion with a full tank, 10 quadrillion spirit crystals, give or take a national economy, 100,000 drops of chaotic source fluid, 1 billion years of cultivation, in bowls. I drank it like soup for half a year, moved to the raw void when the training room started cracking. And when the last drop settled, the thing I'd been building towards since a courtyard in Great Jin finally came down from on high to test me. The immortal tribulation, and not the standard model. When my aura finished unfolding, the clouds that gathered ran 9 colors deep, and Hao Shu, for once, had no jokes. Immortal tribulations come in 5 grades, he recited, hushed. 1 color, you'll be a true immortal. 3, immortal king material. 5, a prodigy of the myriad realms. 7, a future giant of the ages. 9 colors, 9, had been survived by so few beings since the dawn of chaos that every one of them now stood at the absolute peak of all worlds. 9 bolts total. That was the entire tribulation. The first one hit me, the man who tanks tribulations recreationally, the man who uses divine punishment as a spa, and threw my body backward through billions of light years like a swatted fly, and the pain wasn't in my body, it was in the idea of me. Some layer underneath the soul I hadn't known existed, getting flayed and rewritten in 9 colors. I screamed, genuinely, first time in 2 lifetimes. Then I picked myself up out of the void, took stock, alive, furious, impressed, and did the 2 most me things possible in sequence. First, system. Sign in, because if a tribulation cloud is a special location, what do you call the wrath of the primal chaos? The system agreed. It paid out a chaos divine thunder seed, a seed that grows by eating lightning, plus a supreme thunder art and 500,000 years of cultivation, invoiced mid-smiting. Second, I planted that seed directly into my own heart and turned the remaining 8 bolts into contested meals. Each bolt doubled the last. Bolt 3, the seed drank most of it and I barely rocked. Bolt 5, the doubling caught up and we were back to ballistic. By the 7th, my golden body, the body that arm wrestles emperor weapons, was cracking like old porcelain. By the 8th, my consciousness was guttering, thoughts smearing, the void gone gray at the edges. And in that fog, something cold and clear surfaced from the bottom of me, older than the system, older than the bloodline. I died in an alley once, unwitnessed, for nothing. A whole life, spent and unrecorded, gone between 1 heartbeat and a stranger's knife. Not this time. I ate my mother's emergency medicines by the fistful, bit down on a wisdom leaf from Bud's head, unsealed every remaining lock on my bloodline at once. All of them, the whole inheritance, my grandfather's life essence roaring awake in my veins, and stood up for Bolt 9 with my whole ancestry burning behind my ribs. Bolt 9 didn't attack, it embraced. The world went 9-colored and soft, time stopped hurting, and light poured into me carrying insight like a river carries silt. I hung in a cocoon of glory in the middle of the void for hours, while the universe rebuilt me atom by atom. And when I stepped out, new body, new senses, the divine body of time matured into something called the eternal Tao body. I checked my panel and sat down in the middle of nothing. Heavenly immortal realm. Perfection stage. I hadn't just crossed into immortality, I'd been fast-tracked through 2 entire immortal realms as a graduation gift. Somewhere in the middle levels of the ladder I'd spent a lifetime climbing, a fresh sign had been hammered in. Management skipped you ahead. Try to keep up. Oh, and the tribulation paid out a door prize. During Bolt 1, my ballistic body had smashed into something adrift in the deep void. A bronze mountain, 9 light-years tall. Inside it, a dead galaxy and the abandoned estate of a fugitive immortal king, the Tai Gu Immortal Palace, parked out here 200 million years ago by an owner who never came back. The mountain itself was an immortal king artifact. Its residents had long since stripped the valuables and fled, but nobody had ever managed to take the mountain because nobody could refine it. It took me 3 years, 9 light-years of bronze, folded down to 9 inches, heavy as a grudge, in my pocket. Some people find coins on the sidewalk. I get flattened into abandoned real estate by the wrath of heaven. Luck is a skill. I've stopped apologizing for it. Then I did the hardest thing my cheat-fattened soul had ever attempted. I sat still for 300 years. Here was the logic. The system's rewards scale with where you sign in. I'd proven that from tribulation clouds to holy mountains. And every sign-in I burned in this backwater was a sign-in I couldn't spend in the primordial ancient realm. There, my clan's ground was soaked in trillions of years of glory. Spending them here was ordering the tasting menu at a gas station. So, I hoarded. Decade after decade, saving every daily like a miser, topping up my realm only with stockpiled cultivation. Immortal King, late stage, by the slow road, while running the world's most relaxed empire from a garden chair. Reading with Haoshu, fishing, watching little Frost grow from kitten-sized to slightly larger kitten-sized. Because divine beasts mature at the speed of continental drift, and she was, developmentally, a toddler who outranked armies. The universe sent entertainment when I got restless. An ancient local legend, the azure leaf old ancestor, dragged his dying lifespan through a one-color immortal tribulation in the center of the star system. The region held its breath. I watched from my porch with Winegit, and made it, becoming the 9 heavens star region's first new immortal in an age. Good for him, I thought, entirely sincerely, which shows you how naive 3 centuries of peace had made me. My parents visited too, incarnations, threaded down between worlds after 3 centuries of my mother nagging my father into the expedition. His own account was that she'd asked, why isn't Wang Kai back yet? No fewer than 1,000 times, and that he'd finally proposed the trip in self-defense. They came in stealthed, intending to spy on their boy's progress like proper parents. I let them hover invisibly over my garden for a full minute, mother whispering that I'd grown taller and more handsome, father agreeing that I clearly took after him, before inviting them down for tea, and enjoying the rare sight of my father short-circuiting over having been detected. Then came the interrogation. What's your cultivation now? A little higher than yours, father. He laughed at the joke. I released a wisp of my realm. He crushed the teacup in his hand, shot to his feet, and, I treasure this, accused me of being an imposter possessing his son's body. At which point my mother smacked his arm and observed that a father who can't recognize his own child has problems no cultivation can fix. When the evidence settled, soul origin verified, age confirmed, an immortal king at 300 years old sitting in his own garden pouring tea, the man laughed so hard and so long that the palace shook. My son! Unprecedented in all history. Ha ha ha. My mother took my hand, quieter, and asked what it had cost me, because mothers always audit the price tag on a miracle. And I told her, honestly, that I'd mostly eaten well and slept a lot, and she chose not to believe me and held my hand anyway. And I understood that everything I'd built out here, the planets, the vaults, the dead tyrants, had been, in some quiet way, a long letter home, and it had finally been read. They stayed half a year. Mother left me 2 immortal artifacts and a promise of supplies. Father left everything in his pockets and an apology that it wasn't more. Rich or poor, parents are parents. They will empty their wallet into your hands while telling you they brought nothing. The peace broke, in the end, over gift etiquette. The new Immortals sect, the 10,000 Transformations Heavenly Gate, held a grand Tao lecture, the traditional post-ascension fundraiser where every power in the region lines up to donate congratulations. Wang Zhentian attended with the family's first invitation in a million years and walked straight into a coordinated ambush disguised as a receiving line. Every other faction, briefed in advance like a cartel, presented 10 imperial weapons and 10 emperor-grade herbs apiece, identical to the crystal, enough to look devout, not enough to upstage the neighbors. Wang Zhentian, uninformed, stepped up with 1 imperial weapon and 1 emperor herb, which, by any sane arithmetic, was a prince's tribute. The hall went quiet, the way halls do when the trap springs. The vice sect leader looked at the 2 treasure boxes like they'd tracked mud on his floor. What is the meaning of this from the Wang family? I'm told my old patriarch's face was a portrait. He'd come to be polite, at cost, and was being shaken down in front of the region with a gratuity menu. Forgive us, he said, sweet as vinegar. Our family isn't as well off as you all. And when the vice sect leader started in on how a family that looted the Shura Divine Hall shouldn't cry poverty, Wang Zhentian put both boxes away, both, announced that his gift was clearly unwelcome, and headed for the door. An elder blocked it, the new immortal's own disciple, declaring that the Wang family owed the whole region an explanation for upsetting the ancient balance, and that they might not be leaving today. When Wang Zhentian walked past him anyway, the man swung and got put through the back wall of his own sect's great hall by a butler's palm, which brought the whole mountain down on my family, which was, of course, the point of the whole pantomime. And then the freshly minted immortal himself descended, glowing with new divinity, to personally execute my relatives for the crime of insufficient catering. Here's the part they didn't know. The whole performance, the snub, the provocation, the ambush, had been choreographed by the new immortal himself, because he'd heard what had really killed the Divine Hall's ancestor projection, a true immortal artifact walking around this star region in mortal hands. He was due to ascend to the upper realm within a century, and the upper realm, by every rumor, eats the unarmed. So he engineered a grievance against my family to create a legal-looking excuse to rob them. 3,000 years of cultivation, 1 tribulation past godhood, and his first divine act was insurance fraud. My family fought before the god arrived, and fought well. That's the part I replay. A dozen Wang emperors back-to-back over a burning mountain, each with a pseudo-immortal artifact I'd left them, carving through the heavenly gates old monsters, while the region's delegations scattered to the horizon to spectate from minimum safe distance. Wang Zhentian took the worst of it, drawing half the sect onto himself out of stubborn patriarch pride, armor cracking, trump cards burning, one by one. And when the immortal descended, young-faced and glowing, announcing he would slay the criminals to comfort his disciples' spirits, with the bored cadence of a man reading a menu, my old patriarch didn't beg. He drew an unremarkable black longsword, unsealed it, and swung at a god. That sword was the part I knew, and the god didn't. I'd pressed it on Wang Zhentian months earlier with 3 words of instruction, for emergencies only, and the old man had carried it like a lunch he didn't order, far too polite to ask what a plain black blade was for. This was what it was for. The sword light was plain, no thunder, no glory. It crossed the sky the way a sentence crosses a page, and time stood still around it, and it passed through the azure leaf old ancestor and kept going into the dark. The region's first new immortal in an age came apart in 2 halves and blew away as ash on a wind that hadn't been there a moment before. His sect followed him by sundown. My family was very thorough. They even recovered the gift registry ring with everyone's tribute in it, 230 imperial weapons, which struck me as poetic. And every power in the star region spent that night rediscovering an old truth their grandmothers could have told them for free. Immortals are just people who die differently. Me? I watched it from my porch, again. My family fought that entire war themselves, with tools I'd left them. And I never lifted a finger, and that was the proudest I'd felt since Great Jin. You know you've protected people properly when you become unnecessary. I spent my remaining local decades on one last hobby, heaven farming. The chaos thunder seed in my heart ate lightning, and every universe's heavenly Tao dispenses lightning free of charge to anyone who flaunts power above the local limit. So I toured the neighboring middle worlds, strolled in through their sky barriers, flexed until the local heavens lost their temper, and stood in their divine punishment with my mouth open. 10,000 thunder dragons I punched apart and drank. Then the heavens escalated to a single thunder dragon, light years long, magnificent, a god-sized temper tantrum, and we fought for half a month across the void, hundreds of thousands of exchanges, my first real workout since the tribulation. It ended the only way it could. The great dragon paused mid-clash, looked at me with what I can only describe as managerial resignation, and went home, dissolving back into its own storm mid-retreat. The sea of lightning evaporated behind it at speed. The literal will of heaven looked at its budget, looked at me, and decided I wasn't worth the electricity. I stood in the empty sky shouting, "Hey, come back!" like a man whose gym closed early. Histories started going quiet when I entered. I'd become a cosmic noise complaint. One thing remained before leaving for home, a debt, the only kind I honor with interest. On a farewell pass through the Tianshuan continent, I found the place scarred. A foreign power called the Tianyang Divine Palace had spent years ransacking the world hunting Immortal King artifact fragments, the same salvage I'd casually pocketed from the fire abyss. And when they couldn't find what was already in my pocket, they'd started killing emperors on suspicion. Among the dead, cornered by 3 of their ancestors and self-destructing rather than kneel, Xiong Jin, the Red Emperor, the one man in that whole world who'd ever treated me as a friend first and a phenomenon second. The Tianyang ancestors were still on the continent, mid-victory lap, demanding fragments from the survivors when I stepped out of the void. They demanded the fragment from me, too. I showed it to them, let them get one good look at the thing their whole crusade had been for, and erased them. 3 ancestors, 30 emperors, all of it, faster than their triumph could change expressions. Then I crossed 500 billion light years to their home star, emptied the Tianyang Divine Palace of every soul and every stone, pulled their captive flames out by the roots, and fed them to my own fire, and left the shell standing as a monument to the price of shopping in my world. And then I went to a crude stone marker on a nameless peak, the cenotaph the survivors had raised for their dead emperors, and poured a pot of wine into the dirt for a man who once flew down into a burning abyss to warn a stranger about the deep end. He'd have laughed at all of it, I think. The dog meat, the auctions, the fishing rod. I sat with the stone until the wine was gone, and I didn't make it funny, because some things you don't owe the audience. You owe them to the dead. Then I stood up, called the boat, gathered my family of monsters and plants, and one increasingly round bird, said goodbye to 3 friends who had their own roads now, quasi-emperors all, guardians of their own worlds, men who no longer needed a boss, only a brother, and pointed the bow at the world my parents came from. 100 years of hoarded sign-ins in the bank, 36,500 days of them. Wong Clan, I said to the windshield of the universe, I'm coming home. Getting into a great thousand world is supposed to be the final exam of ascension. The barrier alone kills anything below true immortal. I walked through it like a bead curtain, crushed the golden teleportation talisman my father had left, and felt actual fear for the first time in a century. The talisman's spatial power picked me up like a leaf, and my own mastery of space, 2 fused laws, an emperor's pride, registered as a toy in a toddler's fist against it. Immortal Emperor work. The realm above the realm above me. I arrived at the Wong clan's gate recalibrated and, for once in my recent life, appropriately humble. That lasted about 10 minutes, which is how long it took to see the place. The Wong clan doesn't live in a country or on a planet. They live in a private universe, a natural pocket cosmos the size of a middle world, entirely theirs. And in its center floats a continent 900 million light years across, hand-forged by some ancestor out of compacted stars, with 9,000 ancient planets drifting above it like lanterns. Each planet is one family's residence. They're ranked in 9 tiers, the 9 heavens palaces, and the top tier, reserved for immortal emperors, has never once been fully occupied in the clan's history. Because even here, even in this family, beings of that rank are a short list. My childhood clothes were hanging in a palace on the 3rd tier. My mother had kept them, all of them. 400 years of outfits, bought in every size I never got to wear, hanging in a wardrobe in a palace on a planet in a bottled universe, waiting. She met me at the teleportation temple and hugged me before my feet touched the ground. And this hug was different from the incarnations because it was her, the original, the woman who'd handed her 2-year-old to a trial and spent 4 centuries setting a table for him. "You left when you were 2, she said into my shoulder. "I didn't even get to raise you." My eyes did something I won't apologize for. My father stood behind her, failing to look composed, and behind him, the duty officer of the teleportation temple, a top-grade immortal king I'd noticed on arrival, guarding what amounted to the clan's front door. This family uses demigods as receptionists, stood gaping at the sight of the main line's lost heir walking in off the void. We flew home as a family, and my mother narrated the whole way like she'd rehearsed it for centuries, which she had. The palace planet where we lived, the tier system, which elders to charm and which to dodge. The household staff, including Aunt Shui Yuan, her lifelong companion maid, who greeted me by reminiscing fondly about the bedwetting habits of a certain 2-year-old with a divine bloodline. At which point my 400 years of accumulated gravitas died without issue. And then my mother cooked, herself. Golden-feathered immortal chicken soup my father carried the tureen in with both hands, beaming, having hunted the bird personally, blue-scaled fish, immortal cloud cakes, because you loved them when you were little, dishes whose ingredients outvalued my first 3 planets, piled into my bowl faster than any immortal could eat. In this family, dinner is literally cultivation. 1 feast at my mother's table equals a decade of training, which means she can now love me at a measurable rate in years per meal. I'm the terror of 7-star systems, and my mother thinks I'm underfed. Both things are true. That's what home is. And then, alone that night in the palace she'd prepared for me, sitting on an immortal bed surrounded by 400 years of unworn clothes, I said the words I'd been saving across 100 years and half a cosmos. System, 10 annual sign-ins. The first chime nearly stopped my immortal heart. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have obtained a Chaos Supreme Treasure, the Chaos Green Lotus. I sat there with the words hanging in my skull. Chaos Supreme Treasure. The tier above innate. The tier the myths are embarrassed to describe. The class of object that predates universes and gets fought over by beings whose names are load-bearing. My gourd, my beloved, economy-eating gourd, was an innate treasure, and the system had just casually topped it on chime 1 of 10. The remaining 9 came down like bells at a coronation. The Eye of Time and the Eye of Space, twin innate treasures granting direct command of both my laws. An innate sword-nourishing gourd, an innate peach tree with 99 life-extending peaches glowing on the branch. A supreme ability called Words Become Law, remember that one. A supreme sword-drawing art. An Immortal Emperor war bow. 30 million years of cultivation. 10 billion immortal crystals. I sat in the rain of miracles, doing the comparison in my head. 100 years of annual sign-ins in the lower world had produced, at absolute best, 2 Immortal Emperor artifacts. 1 evening on clan soil beat the whole century. Location, location, location. System, I said with feeling, I absolutely love you. The system, as ever, said nothing, which after 400 years I've chosen to read as mutual. I laughed until Little Frost woke up and bit me. The follow-up sign-ins confirmed the pattern and the fine print. Same location pays less each time. The clan was a mine, not a fountain, and it had 9,000 unvisited veins. I drank a drop of immortal-grade source fluid, cracked through Immortal King perfection, and hit the wall every Immortal King hits, the Tao itself. To become an Immortal Emperor, you don't accumulate, you comprehend, you seize a great Tao whole. And cultivators camp on that doorstep for billions of years. Me, I had 30 million years of insight-soaked cultivation and a peach tree. I broke through the ceiling's ceiling instead, quasi-immortal emperor, the overflow rank for those who max the meter without the epiphany, at 400 years old. The youngest in the recorded history of all realms, probably, but I'd stopped keeping score against history. History wasn't trying. Introducing my family to my finances was its own comedy arc, starting with the formal audience. My grandfather, Wang Changsheng, Immortal Emperor, clan chief, a man with the face of a stern 30-year-old and the seniority of a mountain range, received me in the true martial hall on the 9th tier, pinched my cheek exactly once for old time's sake, and then did the double take of his epoch when he failed to read my cultivation. The conversation that followed featured my father getting slapped across the hall. "You knew he was an immortal king and didn't report it!" "Father, would you have believed me?" "Whether I believe you is my business. Whether you report is yours," which I watched from a safe angle, learning a great deal about the household physics my father had grown up under, and why he flinches at teacups. And then grandfather's genuine worry surfaced beneath the theater. Breakthroughs that fast usually mean forbidden arts, the kind that mortgage your life wheel, shorten eternity to millennia, snuff souls past reincarnation's reach. He was afraid for me. So I handed him a drop of immortal-grade chaotic source fluid and told him to check the merchandise himself. He drank it, gained 10,000 years of cultivation on the spot as an emperor, and blew my father through the wall of the hall with the aura surge, which nobody apologized for because apparently that's just how load-bearing walls work in this family. Then the clan chief of one of the 13 ruling powers of the primordial ancient realm turned to me with the eyes of a market grandmother and asked the two questions that actually matter. How much per drop? And can we overcharge the elders? His opening proposal was 10 billion a head, rip those old misers to the bone, and I, the voice of moderation, talked him down to 5 billion out of respect for my seniors, a sentence I never expected to say about extortion. He handed me his entire savings on the spot as the first order and threw in a top-grade Immortal King sword as a first meeting gift, and within a year the operation was humming. Ancient hoarders on the upper tiers quietly funneling crystal mountains through my grandfather, who ran sales like a born fence, collecting margin in gossip and favors. Me condensing drops between naps, every crystal of profit going straight back into my own cultivation. The family that price gouges together stays together. My parents got the full package, obviously, free over their objections, because the objections were adorable. Source fluid by the bowl, wisdom leaves from Bud's head, peaches from the tree. My father went from heavenly immortal to immortal king in half a year, and celebrated like a man who'd waited 10,000 years, which he had. My mother matched him a month later with twice the grace. Then both of them, force-fed enlightenment, broke the limit into quasi-immortal emperor. And my father spent a week walking around the palace tall, until grandfather drafted him into clan administration as the price of power. At which point he tried to sell me to the job instead. "Father, Wang Kai is stronger, make him clan chief," and was overruled on the grounds that I was too promising to waste on paperwork. I have never loved a bureaucratic decision more. My aunt, Wang Qinglian, immortal king at 100,000 years old, terrifying, delightful, pinched my cheeks like I was still 2, demanded to know why I hadn't brought home a girl, and gifted me a small golden catalog which turned out to be an annotated ranking of the 100 most beautiful and talented women in the whole realm. I read it with the gravity of a scholar. For research, academic standpoint, we've been over this. The realm itself, I should sketch, because it's the map of the rest of my life. 1,008 immortal domains, each the size of billions of lesser universes. And above all their little empires, 13 superpowers ruling from the roof of everything. 5 supreme emperor clans, my Wang clan, sole ruler of an entire top-grade domain. My mother's Dongfang emperor clan, same tier, better cheekbones. The Shen Yuan, the Jiang, and the Thousand Leaves emperor clan, remember them. 4 supreme immortal courts. 4 immortal Dao systems, including an all-female sect called the Yaoqi Heavenly Palace, whose current celestial maiden topped my aunt's catalog. Below the 13, a second tier of clans with 10+ immortal emperors each. Below that, lineages proud to own 1 emperor. Below that, immortal king sects, and below that, everything else in creation, filed under a single collective label that translates roughly as small forces, which is the 13 Thrones way of alphabetizing infinity. My family's dinner table gossip was the geopolitics of heaven, passed with the fish course. Which brings us to the birthday party and the 2 clowns, and the day my father got his moment. My uncle Dongfang Wang, my mother's brother, immortal king at the extreme peak, a gentleman down to the bone, was turning 600,000, and every superpower in the realm sent delegations to the Dongfang Emperor clan's own bottled universe. We went as family. I met my maternal grandparents. Grandmother and mother look like twin sisters. The Dongfang picked their faces from the top shelf, got an immortal king battle puppet as a welcome gift from my uncle. and was immediately adopted by my little cousin Dongfang Ru, 300 years old, appearance and soul of a 10-year-old sugar hurricane who'd been the family baby her whole life and, on discovering a younger cousin existed, appointed herself my tour guide, protector, and social secretary in one breath. When some divine son from an Immortal Emperor sect accosted us on the street to flirt with her, she looked him up and down and delivered, with papal solemnity, "You're too ugly to know my name." The Dongfang Emperor clan judges everyone by beauty, openly, as policy. I have never felt more genetically at home. The divine son did not take it well. His name was Guo Lei, divine child of the Saint Sky Immortal Gate, an Immortal Emperor lineage, he informed us at volume, a top sect of the whole domain. Meanwhile, an entire street of Dongfang shopkeepers stared at him with the fascinated pity usually reserved for men proposing at funerals, because that's the thing he hadn't done the reading on. He was standing in the Dongfang Emperor clan's own territory, insulting the little princess of the house. And then, when I laughed, pivoting to threaten ME, "Pretty boy, do you want to die?" with all the situational awareness of a man lighting matches in a fireworks warehouse. My little cousin's face went thundercloud, and I was about to let her handle it. She'd have enjoyed it, but my uncle's birthday was days away, and bloodshed before a party is poor manners. So I used my newest toy instead. Words become law, a supreme ability that makes my spoken word binding fact for anything beneath my rank. "It is not advisable to kill during the festivities," I said, mildly, "so you should handle it yourself." He froze. His eyes went wide with horror at his own rising hand, and then the divine son of the Saint Sky Immortal Gate concluded his own story, immediately and efficiently, in front of 40 witnesses. Meanwhile, I stood there, with my hands behind my back, radiating innocence. I vanished the remains with a wave, festival manners, and my cousin stared at the settling dust, then at me, and demanded to know how I did that. I told her he'd probably just been very scared of her family. She narrowed her eyes with the exact expression of a child who knows an adult is lying but can't prove it in court. And then decided, being 300 years old and sugar-powered, that the important thing was we still had 4 candy stalls left on the itinerary. Then came Wei Feng, who'd been watching me from a gold-trimmed pavilion all afternoon like a man selecting produce. Son of the clan chief of the Thousand Leaves Emperor clan, one of the 5 supreme clans, our institutional rivals, 1 door, 2 supremes, pedigree. An immortal king in his own right, here for the birthday, and carrying an old grudge as luggage. Years ago, at some place called the Burial God Abyss, my uncle by blood, Wang Yuan, had leaned on his cultivation advantage to humiliate Wei Feng's older brother. So Wei Feng had decided, with the moral clarity of the truly petty, to balance that ledger by bullying the Wang clan's newest and smallest. Me, 400 years old, in the middle of my family's allies' territory, 3 streets from my grandmother's kitchen. His flunky pointed me out. He descended into the street with the leisure of a man opening a gift. My little cousin planted herself in front of me and went off like a tea kettle. "This is the Murong Emperor clan. How dare you?" And he waved her aside as an irrelevant child, which was his second mistake, and pressed his full immortal king aura on me, which was his first, and watched, increasingly unwell, as it did nothing at all. He escalated to maximum. I stood in it like weather. And then, visibly rattled but committed, he offered his terms. Call my own uncle a bastard, publicly, and he'd let the little one go. I looked at this man, heir of a supreme clan, veteran of 200,000 years, threatening a child over sibling gossip, and decided the situation called for craftsmanship. Words become law, shielded from every watching eye. Leave this territory, fly far, far away, find a deserted place, and self-destruct. He left mid-sentence, flew for hours, past star systems, his own bodyguards chasing him in bafflement, until he found a suitably desolate stretch of nowhere and detonated like a fireworks barge, injuring his whole escort. And here's the beautiful part. When his immortal emperor father, Wei Dao, came storming across the realms, dredged the river of time itself to replay his son's death, and found nothing, a blank. I'd erased that stretch of space-time like a chalkboard. All the evidence showed a healthy young man flying to nowhere and exploding out of sheer enthusiasm. Wei Dao raged at the Dongfang gates. My maternal grandfather, Dongfang Yuan, Immortal Emperor, mid-stage, terrifyingly serene, met him with sympathy. logic, and the observation that grief is not evidence, and sent him home boiling. The old man knows I did it, can't prove I did it, and has an Immortal Emperor-sized grudge with my name on it and nowhere to file it. I confessed to my grandfather Dongfeng Yuan privately, because family shouldn't have to guess. He blinked at, I killed him, blinked harder at, I've been an immortal king for 100 years, gave me a protective talisman loaded with his own power anyway, grandparent's gonna grandparent, and issued the only warning that mattered. The 1,000 leaves will come for you sideways now, forever. Noted, filed, and honestly, fine. Every good story needs someone in the audience grinding their teeth. The birthday banquet delivered one last gift, and it wasn't for me. Picture the hall, representatives of every superpower in the realm, immortal wine, 100 delicate diplomatic currents. And in the middle of it, Prince Di Hao of the eternal immortal kingdom looking around loudly for his cousin Wei Feng, who was supposed to attend on his brother's behalf, and who was, at that moment, drifting through a distant nowhere in several thousand pieces. The news reached the prince mid-feast via transmission. He connected 0 dots correctly. Wang clan was involved. Therefore, Wang clan's young lord would answer, shot to his feet, kicked over his own table of wine and jade, and stormed across the hall to scream at my father, demanded answers, called the deaths a Wang clan murder, and when my father calmly suggested that accusations require evidence, the prince sneered the sentence that sealed his afternoon. Who was my father, anyway? Maybe his big brother Wang Yuan should have come, since he was at least somebody. Understand the stakes of that insult. My father had spent 10,000 years as the young lord in his brilliant elder brother's shadow. The youngest, the weakest, the one his own father slapped across rooms for sport. Whole banquets of his youth had been spent swallowing exactly this sentence. And now, a 200,000-year-old mid-stage immortal king was serving it to him in public, to a man who'd spent the last 2 years drinking his son's source fluid. My father stood up and slapped him across the entire banquet hall and into a wall. The hall froze. The prince peeled himself out of the masonry, aura detonating, charged back swinging with his full cultivation, and got slapped into the same wall, harder, leaving a matching dent, by a young lord, whom every calculating eye in the room was now urgently reappraising, because whatever had just happened, 10,000-year-olds don't do that to 200,000-year-olds. And yet, the prince's quasi-immortal emperor bodyguard tensed to intervene, felt several immortal emperors in the architecture politely feeling him back, and stood down forever. You can't beat one of my hands, my father told the wall's newest installation, dusting his sleeve. And you mention my brother with what strength exactly? Come collect the debt whenever you like. I keep long hours. My mother covered her smile with professional slowness. My uncle theatrically restored order and had the prince escorted to rest, which the prince declined in favor of storming out of the star system. And I sat there, watching my dad have his own protagonist moment, 300 generations of face reclaimed in 2 slaps, and applauded inside where it counts. Every man deserves one banquet like that. Mine bought his with my source fluid, and I have never spent better. We stayed half a year, and the half year had one more scene worth keeping. My birthday gift to my uncle had been sitting in his study unopened for days. He'd finally examined it, recognized it, and summoned my father in quiet alarm because the crystal box held a Bodhi seed, a legendary medicine that clears heart demons and sharpens comprehension itself, a thing his clan's archives described and no living member had seen. He tried to refuse it. Elders don't take treasures from juniors. The thing was too precious. Absolutely not. So I came down to the study and took out a whole handful of them. I own a divine Bodhi tree. It carries 3,000 seeds. I'd honestly forgotten they were rare. And watched a 600,000-year-old gentleman's manners short-circuit in real time. He accepted the one seed with both hands, and the careful voice men use in temples, told me that if I ever needed anything, and went into closed-door seclusion within the week, chasing the breakthrough he'd been circling for millennia. His son, Jian Yu, my 50,000-year-old cousin, had already locked his doors days earlier, having drunk wine with me one evening, heard my father's realm mentioned in passing, and left the table mid-toast shouting that he refused to be out-cultivated by his own uncle-in-law. I have this effect on households. It's a gift, and I sell it accordingly. Then I left my little cousin enough immortal candy to destabilize her household and went home to the Wang clan with my parents, one shade closer to the thing I'd been circling for 4 centuries without naming it. Not power. I had power the way oceans have water. Belonging. Slowly, planet by planet, dinner by dinner, slap by paternal slap. Belonging. Home delivered 2 pieces of news. First, my grandfather, having tested my father's new quasi-immortal emperor rank, declared him ready for clan chief training, to my father's open despair and my open delight. Second, and bigger, the clan had moved up the battle for Daozi, 3 years out instead of 200. Context, because this title runs the rest of my story. Daozi, the son of the Tao, isn't best of the young generation, though it includes that. It's the clan's formal bet on a future supreme, a being who might one day climb past Immortal Emperor entirely into the Tao realm, where the 13 powers keep their true gods. The contest itself, all clans children under 3,000, open brackets, is theater. The real gate comes after, a trial ground called the Asked Heart Forest, built by an ancient ancestor which no amount of muscle can bluff. Prodigies pass the tournament every era. The forest stays shut for hundreds of millions of years at a stretch. Win the crowd, then convince the forest, or the title stays empty another eon. The clan had pre-designated their candidate for this cycle, which was why the schedule moved. The candidate was me. No pressure. The last man to want the spotlight this much was every other man ever. But I genuinely have preferred another century of anonymous dinners, right up until my father mentioned, offhandedly, the Daozi's actual job description. Cultivate well. And beat down the young geniuses of the other 12 superpowers whenever they get loud. Professional face slapper. For the family. With benefits. I accept the nomination, I said, possibly before he finished the sentence. 3 years was also exactly the runway I needed for the last door. I'd been camped at quasi-immortal Emperor with 1 billion years of stockpiled insight, one epiphany short of the summit. And the epiphany finally came at dawn, alone, in a sealed palace under my new favorite treasure, an umbrella called Sky Covering that hides its holder from heaven's own bookkeeping. The great Tao of time opened like a struck bell. Chains of order wrapped the room. Phantom giants glanced at me across the ages, and the last shackle on the thing I'd been since a womb in Great Jin came off. Immortal Emperor. 400 and change years old, the rank where you stop borrowing the great Tao and start being on a first-name basis with it. And I felt the danger in that immediately, a cool tide rising under my thoughts. The Tao is vast, serene, and utterly indifferent, and merging with it pulls you toward its temperature. I could feel the human parts of me, the appetite, the jokes, the grudges, the love, going quiet like rooms with the lamps dimming. A lot of emperors let it happen. It's peaceful. It's also a death nobody holds a funeral for. I stood in my sealed palace and had it out with the universe directly. I am not the Tao's. The Tao is mine. I did not crawl out of an alley and across half a cosmos to become a serene piece of furniture. The tide receded. My aura folded down until I read as an ordinary mortal the final fashion in a world of blazing auras, looking like nobody at all. And the first thing I wanted, with my whole transcendent being, was one of my mother's cloud cakes. Good. Still me. Inspection passed. And then, the first indulgence of an emperor of time. Before breakfast, I walked the river. The river of time isn't a place. It's everywhere. And now I could step into it like wading into shallows. I walked upstream and watched my mother arrive at her girlhood palace, small and imperious, ordering the clouds rearranged. Further, and stood invisible at my parents' wedding, my father's face as the Dongfeng gates opened, terrified and certain at once, 10,000 years before I'd make him rich. I looked for myself in the scenes and found the strangest thing. I wasn't there. An emperor exists once, across all timelines simultaneously. There is no young me standing in the past, only the one continuous me, smeared gently across everything I've ever been. I tried looking downstream, at the future, and got fog. The future guards itself, even from its owners. And somewhere in the deep upstream, at distances that made my new senses ache, ancient somethings drifted like whales in dark water, vast and slow and older than the concept of years. I kept a courteous distance and walked home to the present. The realm has elders even for emperors, especially for new ones who skipped the line. And then, the strangeness of my life in one image, the newest Immortal Emperor in the myriad realms spent his next 2 years in a tower, grinding mobs like a first-week gamer. Because raw rank had outrun my technique, and I refused to be the noble who dies rich. The Myriad Spirits Pagoda, the clan's great trial grounds, a 108-floor Tao artifact hundreds of light years tall, planted in the middle of the continent like a nail through the world. Every floor is its own landscape, deserts, mountain ranges, the odd private ocean, stocked with vicious beasts the tower breeds from its own power, scaled by floor and programmed with exactly one opinion about clan members: kill on sight. Slay 100 and the next floor opens. 7 public power rankings hang in the sky outside, followed by a 1 trillion-member clan like a national sport, with one elegant privacy rule: anyone above Immortal King may compete anonymously. Because the true old monsters like their strength the way they like their savings, undisclosed. The first floor greeted me with a horde of Emperor Realm beasts and hundreds of millions of clan juniors mid-grind. I twitched my divine thought. 100 beasts stopped existing. A portal opened. Somewhere nearby, a young disciple who'd spent a month working up the courage to fight one of those things sat down slowly in the sand and reevaluated the universe. I speedran the first 84 floors in half an hour, a clan record nobody will ever verify since I registered anonymously, and hit floor 85, where the tower stopped stalking prey and started stalking peers. The thing sleeping on floor 85 was 3 light years of black-scaled serpent with genuine Immortal Emperor power in its bones. I opened our acquaintance with a full body punch that blew a tunnel through it the width of a solar system. It woke up with feelings about that. And for the first time in years, my punches came back with interest. It tanked my follow-up, roared space into shivers, and hit me with pressure that would have juiced any quasi-emperor into paste. I have never been happier. We traded until its body came apart in halves. I burned the soul, and stood grinning in the wreckage, because the tower had just proven it could keep making these. An infinite gym. Free weights the size of galaxies. No ethics paperwork. Somewhere in the middle, a comedy. On floor 36, I ran into the top 5 of the clan's heavenly immortal ranking. 5 ancient prodigies, 80 to 100,000 years old apiece, who'd never seen my face. A stampede of 100 beasts caught us mid-introduction. I snapped my fingers. The stampede stopped existing. I wished them a pleasant climb and stepped through the next portal. I'm told they stood in the silence for a long moment before one of them said, "We should all break through and go outside more," and that the 5 of them formed a training pact on the spot. Happy to help. Motivation is my ministry. 2 years I stayed. Mid-run, a stack of source fluid and stored insight pushed my cultivation to the Emperor's middle stage, and I skipped from floor 85 straight to 90. There, the beasts run at the strength of veteran mid-stage Emperors, and my kill time ballooned back to half a month apiece. Perfect. That's the number you want in a gym. Barely. Every beast taught me something: how to read a feint delivered through space-time, how to armor a soul mid-swing, how to spend exactly enough power and not a coin more. By the second year, my half-month kills took an afternoon. Efficiency up tenfold. Technique finally worthy of the rank. And then, 92 beasts into my 100, the floor went quiet. I searched for a week. Nothing. I'd eaten the respawn queue. The tomb breeds Immortal Emperor beasts slower than I was breaking them. And worse, some of the clan's old monsters, freshly juiced on my source fluid, had been sneaking in and poaching my floor while I'd been away at the birthday. I stood in the world's greatest gym, closed for restocking, personally responsible for both halves of the shortage, and had to laugh. I signed out, checked my anonymous placement, 21st of 37 listed emperors in the clan, respectable for a toddler, declined the tower's polite offer to publish my name, and went home to get famous the traditional way instead. The announcement that the contest had moved up detonated through the clan like a holiday and a tax audit at once. Prodigies training abroad dropped everything and teleported home. 2,900-year-olds who'd resigned themselves to aging out wept with second-chance joy. And in a star palace on the 4th tier, one young man took it personally. Wang Tianxi, son of an immortal emperor, an imperial son, as the clan calls that lonely club, he'd spent his whole life being bowed to for his father's rank. He'd staked everything on winning Daozi with his own hands, on his own schedule. The clan had just shredded the schedule. He called his father's mirror demanding answers. His father sighed and told him to let things take their course, which is how fathers say, "You're not the candidate," without saying it. Fiancee hung up, stared at the wall, and went straight into a closed-door sprint for one more breakthrough. I want it noted before what happens next. I never disliked the man. Anyone fighting that hard to stop being his father's shadow deserves better material to fight with. The battle for Daozi itself was the biggest gathering I'd ever seen my family hold. A floating arena the size of a weather system, itself an Immortal Emperor artifact, holding a battle space bigger inside than out, ringed by palaces and treasure ships, every branch of a trillion-member clan watching. All contestants under 3,000. Free-for-all format. 3 days, no restrictions except no borrowed artifacts above your own rank. The opening bell released chaos. True immortal prodigies cracked the sky at each other in 100 simultaneous duels. Each exchanged the kind of blow that would have ended dynasties back home, here reduced to undercard entertainment for an audience of immortals eating snacks. I sat in the stands playing with the fox, on the theory that everyone deserves their showcase before the ending arrives. For 2 days, the field boiled down. On day 2, a 600-year veteran named Wang Dung entered like a man stepping over puddles, the clan's famous mid-stage true immortal, the one who'd once beaten 3 seniors in a row on breakthrough day, and cleared the remaining early field with real style, swatting a dozen hopefuls in half an hour, and then standing in the ring, visibly bored. The last tier of prodigies stepped in to deal with him, 30-odd mid-stage true immortals, the cream of 30 centuries. Fiancee among them, grim, loaded with his father's handed-down arts, waiting for a final that would never be what he'd trained for. Because on day 3, Wang Dung looked up at the stands, found me, and did the brave, doomed thing. Called me out by name, in front of the clan, with a sneer about pre-selected princes who don't dare compete. I set the fox down, appeared on the stage, told him to take the first move, since it would be his only one. He came with everything, a high-grade immortal artifact spear, 6 centuries of polish, a beautiful strike. I slapped once. The spear, the immortal artifact, burst into powder, and the wind of the slap, the leftover of it, took Wang Dung off his feet, across the arena, off the barrier, and into the floor, where he lay quietly reconsidering his relationship with talking. The stadium made no sound at all. Then my grandfather's voice, entirely failing to hide the grin in it, invited further challengers. The remaining field, the pride of a supreme clan's young generation, 30 of the finest prodigies of an era, surrendered in a single polite avalanche. Somewhere in the stands, 5 heavenly immortal ancients pointed at the stage, screaming, "That's him! That's Fingersnap Guy!" And Wang Tianxi stared at me with his whole future rearranging behind his eyes. The winner of the battle for Daozi, my grandfather announced, Wang Kai of the main line. The cheer that came back off a trillion-member clan hit like weather, like the tribulation, like something you stand in rather than hear. Daozi, Daozi, Daozi. I stood on the stage in my purple gold robe, with my hands behind my back, in the eye of my family's roar, and let myself feel the whole absurd arc of it at once. 18 years old, I stood in a hall while a girl apologized her way out of marrying me, in front of guests who agreed I was the best argument against arranged engagements. The most powerful being I knew was my father, and the most powerful thing I'd ever done was give up. 400 years later, a whole god clan, the god clan, one of 13 thrones over 1,000 heavens, was chanting my name off the walls of a continent they built by hand. Because the strongest of their young millennia had just declined, unanimously, to share a stage with me. The trash of Great Jin. The Daozi of the Wang clan. Same guy. The universe stabbed me in an alley once, and I've been overcharging it for the kidney ever since. But here's the thing about my family, and the reason the chant hadn't finished echoing before my mind moved on. The tournament was the theater. The title isn't confirmed by applause. It's confirmed by the Ast Heart Forest, the ancestors' trial ground, the gate that stays shut for hundreds of millions of years at a time. The one place in the clan's whole bottled universe where, my father warned me over dinner, strength counts for nothing, where the examiners are luck, fate, karma, and your own unwrapped heart. Prodigies with heaven-defying power have walked in and walked out empty. The forest doesn't ask what you can kill. Nobody who failed it has ever quite explained what it does ask. 3 years, my grandfather gave me, to prepare however I saw fit. The gatekeeper of the place, they say, is an immortal emperor who does nothing else, an emperor employed as a doorman, which tells you what the clan thinks lives behind the door. My father keeps repeating that luck, fate, and karma can't be trained for. My grandfather keeps saying he believes in me, in the tone of a man hedging a bet he's already placed. And me? I spent the walk home doing inventory. A system that heaven itself can't see. A gourd that eats economies. An umbrella that hides me from fate, from the exact forces, funny enough, the forest is said to weigh. 3 years of sign-ins on the richest ground in existence, compounding daily. And underneath all of it, the one asset I've never once had to sign in for. A heart that got stabbed in an alley, died broke and unmourned, and came back stubborn. Somewhere out there, an immortal emperor of the Thousand Leaves clan is still replaying an erased afternoon, patient as poison, waiting for me to step outside the walls. Somewhere above the 9th tier of my family's sky, old monsters who watch the tournament are quietly rewriting their estimates of the next million years. Let them all wait. In 3 years, I walk into a forest that has refused this clan an answer since before my world had a name, carrying a cheat the heavens can't read, to take a title that makes me the official problem of every young god in 1,000 universes. Ask me if I'm nervous. Go ahead. Ask me the way that examiner forest is going to ask me, roots and fate and all. I've got 3 years of sign-ins to stack, and a very good answer.